birds have got intricate language. And we've discovered that other animals other than birds can understand their language too. So animals that live on the ground have learned to decode the language of birds. And the birds will have a particular language for a leopard, a particular language for that animal, a particular language for a snake, believe it or not. But you're right, Cosmic, in that humans have a more refined form of language. And because we have a more refined form of language, we have a more refined form of neurosis that goes with the more refined form of language. But I think that animals do actually suffer certain kinds of neurosis. And I've noticed this. For example, the sharks, certain places here in Cape Town, we started messing with the sharks and we started doing shark tank diving. And the sharks became neurotic here in Cape Town. And they became so neurotic that when the ochre come here, they actually exterminate all of them because the ochre are very intelligent and they can see these sharks aren't right. These sharks have been psychologically messed up. They become neurotic. They actually go and they want to actually bite people because they're angry with people, because they reckon that people are going to come and mess with them in the future. And so, the people didn't come and give them the blood and the tanks of bait this time. So they resent the people and they start attacking the people, even though they're not eating them, but they're doing it maliciously. So it's just interesting to notice that, I think that our idea of animals not having souls, our ideas of animals not having communication, I don't think it's accurate. I think it's something that we've been brainwashed with. Because I think in modern times, we're actually discovering, hold on. And this is something deeply shamanic because I've learned a lot listening to animals. And believe it or not, when you really tune into the bird song, you actually get messages from the birds. And they're communicating on a linguistic level that isn't in the same linguistic paradigm as human speech. It's something a little bit different, but there is communication in it. And even trees, I've noticed, have a form of communication. It might not be auditory. It might be on a slightly different level of being. I think it's on a different field of consciousness, but there is a form of communication happening there. It's just very different and very slow, and maybe it's very tricky for a human mind to follow that communication. But smoke enough DMT, you get the picture. Welcome to Zerilat. How you doing, dear brother?
All good. I'm streaming this on my channel. Yeah, man. A couple of things that I can tap on with this one, right? Animal intelligence is all the animals have brains designed to tap into different kinds of frequencies of consciousness, and mankind has the qualities of all of the animal kingdom within his nature, right? There isn't one animal out there that you can zoom in on and I'm sorry, there isn't one trait that a human has that you can't find a carbon copy in context to the situation that is exactly like what humans do, right? Dolphins and orca are capable of being serial killers. They torture pufferfish just to get high. They have a juvenile delinquency problem in the dolphin community, right? Do they have dolphin court? I don't know. They may have dolphin graveyards like our cousins, the elephants, right? The myth specifically speaks in the Volsung saga that when the hero slays the dragon, he learns the secret language of birds. But this is a mythology that is about the language of nature, is really what that means. Birds being the most talkative of all of nature. And so something associated with the dragon and having the clear vision of how nature talks to you, which is an animist principle, right? And this is the stuff by which we are inspired by the stories of the God Emperor, right? It's why we love Dune and asking ourselves, what would I do if I was Muad'Dib, right? Who identifies with a great worm that he has to ride. It's the Volsung saga told for Arabs, right? That's what happens in Dune. Right? Except he doesn't have to slay the dragon, he just has to ride it. So
and speech becomes his weapon.
Right. And speech becomes his weapon, right? It's his vorpal tongue, it's his weirding way, they call it. The weirding way modules in the Lynch film doesn't exist. That's just an idea that the same force of power that the Bene Gesserit have is a gift that Paul has that he teaches to his elite warriors, right? And so then everybody is doing Guldur, which is what the Norse would identify that as, which is the magical power of what the voice in word can do, right? So because otherwise, that's not a thing in the book, but it's within the realm of reason to imply that they've got something, right? Because of all these guys that are highly inspired, they're hardcore survivalist, fundamentalist, Shai Halud worshippers, right? But death. Animals, as far as I know, only humans do what humans do when they die. This is where I agree with our buddy over here, right? But the way I interpret that is, my understanding of it is from listening to a handful of things about it, knowing a thing or two from hunters. I've hunted and killed a raccoon once myself. I've been with my father on hunting mission for deer when I was a kid a couple of times, and been present when shot. And I even saw a deer that was half dead on the road. I didn't have any means of saving him. He was just dying on the road. He still had spirit. He was kicking his front legs, but he's paralyzed from the back out, and his whatever truck struck him, his ass was hanging out. He was going to die. Not worth it. It was in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, in the middle of the fucking night, and I had just gotten kicked out of a friend's house, and so all I could do was fucking squat by him, and I said a prayer to Freya for a painless passage, and I just drove off upset. They go into shock. Plain and simple. It's they jump straight to the extent they're not worried about the afterlife issue. It's not a thing activating in their nerve. If they've run out of fight and flight and that's it, they're just in the jaws of death, they go into shock. It's just their brain, just like they've already put themselves there. They're like knocking on the door of the bardo, if you will. Right? This is pretty much with all the animals, right?
Isn't that humans too, though? If you allow all your adrenaline to flush your system, there comes a point after the adrenaline high that you will collapse.
Correct, but there's no spiritual fear leading the psyche prior to that. You're just simply you're just simply in your instinctual modes of survival continuity of what your nature is to do, which is to get out of the danger in the first place. You've got fear overcoming you because you can't focus on your instincts because your heart is not set with the other side. And so because you don't live your life in a way that's very considerate of that, and then all of a sudden things pop up, right? Like perhaps it is because man doesn't have animism anymore that we've lost this natural animal nature that belongs in part to what we are as human, because animals all have courage in that respect. Not a single one of them is running from death itself, but it's like, this is the game. I have as much of a right to live as you do, and you unfortunately have a taste for flesh.
Yeah, I want to respond to something that was said earlier about the animals, particularly regarding the afterlife. I've seen situations where an animal will start to realize that it's not going to make it. And at first they'll kind of try to struggle and see if they can kind of bounce back. But to me, it's been seen firsthand that an animal, once they realize that this is the end, they just they can take a willingness to just pass on. They don't have to struggle through it and try to live. They can just let themselves go, and they just kind of, I guess, start over, get reborn. And I think humans used to know that we could do this long ago, but now the whole thing of YOLO, you only live once, and then you have to live with all your experiences and be judged for your time here and now at this one life that you've lived. I think that kind of goes against our intuitive understanding that we really carry the karmic struggle that we've continued to have through many lifetimes, and that it reverts back. And I think a lot of people are well aware of this when they think about their fears that they're born with or that they develop in their lives. Because people have irrational fears that doesn't have anything to do with personal experiences. People have fears of heights, blood, loud noises. I think loud noises is kind of, they say that the fear of loud noises is kind of an inherent trait that everyone's born with. But the same person I heard that from also said that fear of heights is also an inherent thing, which I don't agree with at all. I think some people are really scared of heights, whereas I think other people are completely undaunted by them, even though they should be. They might ought to be scared of heights, but they just are not.
I think here's the other thing, right? Like, it's part of the reason why human beings have to wear clothes and shelter. We are naked just by the merit that we are hairless. We're one of the only hairless mammals naturally occurring on the earth. You have to go to the ocean to find hairless mammals, right? You have to, you know, by that point, it's only like whales and like seals. Even a seal has fur, right? So this gets into like the hair, like the water ape kind of thing. But my point is, we are extraordinarily sensitive. We're very on our nerves, right? We're very exposed to the elements. Like, you know, a furry animal doesn't feel every fucking stick. It doesn't feel every little web and wind and bug on it, right? It's kind of got a light sheathing of armor from just basic subtle elements, which gives it its ability to just fucking run around the woods like it's nothing. Right? You know, wolves, like dogs, like their shit all goes up in them. So like they can just fucking roll on their belly and it's not awkward. You know, they don't need underwear to protect their balls, and they can do all sorts of stuff. Like, I'm being serious here, right? We have to fucking like get dressed to go off into nature, right? You and I, we all know it, right? You know, especially if you've been forced to circumcise, you're a little bit extra worried about what touches the tip of your dick if you're going to run around in the woods butt ass naked. See why they fucking circumcise you? It's another control mechanism. Separates you.
The other interesting thing about
fucking
skin,
exposed. So you don't even have a chance to build up your goddamn fucking nerves, because everybody talks about this idea that when we were created by the Anunnaki, which is more like when we were downgraded by the Anunnaki, is really more of what it is, right? Or at the very least, they force the environment to shift in a way that our genetics didn't match with, right? So it makes us believe we are parasites here and feeling guilty because we're doing what the lion does and eat as a lion eats. We need some food. We need some fucking meat. Right?
Yeah, what about the case of Nebuchadnezzar, who was punished for his megalomania with being sent to live in the wilderness for 7 years having forgotten speech and all human behaviors, he ended up developing what's now referred to as boanthropy, and he joined the wild cattle and lived grazing in the grass on all fours for 7 years. They said when he returned back, his fingernails were so thick, and then his hair was so there was so much hair, and there was so much his hair and his I guess he had like body hair that he had developed from living outside in the night in the cold, that it became more prevalent. And there's actually an ancient theory, or well, I shouldn't say ancient, an older theory in the classical times of evolution called Lamarckian evolution, where Lamarck suggested that the traits that we use can become more pronounced in our lifetime and then be passed on to become more pronounced through epigenetics, which we understand now, which wasn't even a concept then, in the progeny that we have in our children. So they talk about how like we can pass on like dysfunction to our children. Like if you develop diabetes or alcoholism, your children are more predisposed, or, for example. But they don't really talk about how if we develop like really amazing respiratory capacity or like an amazing physical aperture, that we could pass that to our kids. But that's been found to be true as well. And even through conditioning, one individual themselves can go through a radical transformation. And look what happened to Wim Hof. Like he was just a regular guy until his wife died, and he was forced to like quit his job to take care of his kids full time. And he had never really spent time with the kids. It was really stressful for him to go through doing that without having the means to be able to do it financially, and the experience to be able to do it. Plus he was struggling with grieving for his wife through the process. And so he learned to go and to do these like cold showers, and eventually developed this breathing technique that allows him to change his internal body temperature and actually take the hot blood from his organs that he can then bring to the surface of his skin somehow, which they've studied and found, which is kind of anomalous at this point. But people can do like what they force themselves to do if they like condition themselves to do it. And I think we could all do this. The Wim Hof method is actually carried on from the Buddhist technique called Jitumo, which is a breathing technique that they can use to keep themselves warm and bring the warmth to their skin, which can similarly be done by drinking alcohol, but it does actually like make you colder inside. And so when the cold does get to you, you're just going to be finished.
Yeah, the other thing people don't talk about in regards to skin is I think it actually is something that aids in perception, because you think about it, if you have a lot of fur, like you're talking about, and you're touching the objects, you don't necessarily feel things. But if you have skin and you can really feel the textures of certain objects and the things being sharp and brittle, et cetera, that's actually like a different sensory apparatus that gives you more information in regards to the nature of the reality around you. So I think in a lot of ways, our hairlessness actually played a part in the development of our sentience. I don't know, maybe it's a crazy theory, but I think it's part of it.
Yeah, you know, I would add something here. I think, and this is verified, you know, I've had experience before where I was outside and it was -7, -8, and there was ice everywhere on the floor. And there was, you know, the snow had turned to ice. It was like it was a blizzard, but it was cold. And I wasn't wearing a top. So I was basically, I wasn't completely naked, but I was wearing pants. I put on pants and I didn't have a top on. And the cold was really getting to my body. And I went inside myself and I went searching for fire inside myself, and I found fire inside myself. And I sat for about an hour and a half in this fire. And I was so warm. And when my ex-wife came to find me, because my top was gone, I didn't know what had happened to my top. And I thought I'd left it somewhere, but obviously someone had picked it up, moved it. And basically, when she came to find me, she was like really afraid. Like, oh my God, yeah, you've been here like the whole time. And I was smiling, and she touched me and she burnt her finger. She burnt herself. She got burnt. She touched me and it was like, and she, ow. And I was steaming. I was steaming and I was smoking. I was so hot. I felt like I was on fire, but I felt good. And she was like, holy crap, you're hot. And she couldn't understand because I was sitting outside in the ice, but I'd gone into a deep meditative state. So my point is, and this is verified by a lot of yogis, by a lot of Buddhist monks. They do this all the time, right? They go up into the high mountains and they do this. And like, personally, I've had this experience. So I can validate that from my experience. This is more than possible. And I don't think you have to be that extremely advanced to do it. So I think it's something that more people can do. They just don't know that they can do it. And if you don't know that you can do something, you won't even really try, right? But that's like an interesting food for thought. It's like, my girlfriend will joke, and we will joke that like I'm so hot when if I'm laying in a bed, I'm a heater. I can just about heat up an entire room if I'm laying in a bed. The whole room will get warm just with me being in the bed, and the bed will get warm, and I like radiate heat outwards. So some people are hot-blooded and they're just very hot, and they're in tune with their element of fire. So I think that like maybe humans not having skin, not having fur, we don't have fur because we didn't need fur. How's that for another way of looking at it? I think that we were in tune with our elemental nature, with our elemental potential, with what we today call occult spiritual power. And before we were linguistically sort of trained and like basically, like you say, Zerilat, the mixing of our genes with the pre-Phoenician, with the Sumerians, or whoever they were that's written about in the Sumerians. I don't think it's the Sumerians. I think the Sumerians were writing about more ancient people. And I think it's like the old stories. But whoever it was that mixed their genes with us, like, they might have done us one or two favors along the way, but I think they also undid us favors, right? And I think like maybe humans have this evolutional potential that we don't need fur. And maybe we don't need, like, I'll tell you, I've spent a lot of time in the wild naked. And, okay, sure, I've been bitten on my testicles by a spider. That's not fun, right? But that was because I wasn't being conscious. I was smoking too many chillums, right? There's nothing wrong with smoking a few chillums, but like when is enough? Like, do you have to smoke 4 chillums at a time? So my point is that I think like there definitely is more to the human potential than what we give it credit for in this modern society, because we've been trained to think and of human beings as being limited, because that's part of the brainwashing. What do you guys think? Brainwashing or real?
Yeah, I think there's some brainwashing going on there. Personally, I feel like humans have a deeper understanding of consciousness, and basically we seem to have a deeper connection with language, and I think this is responsible for basically a lot of the work that we do in creating our technology that we have, our coping mechanisms and means of subsistence, to be able to have clothing to drape over us to protect us since we are missing our coat of fur, and create food in kind of an unnatural way that creates better abundance than we would be able to find by foraging, which seems convenient for us. But I feel like the convenience of this it kind of takes away our sole purpose here, which is to like condition ourselves to become more effortless in the natural environment, so we don't have to tinker with things so much. Because it seems like our tinkering with things to make things convenient for ourselves has made things harder for ourselves in the long term, and has made things very hard for the accompanying species that we live amongst, that are being trampled by us and thrown into extinction. It's considered that we're in a extinction level 5 condition right now. it's an extinction event, number 5 that we're going through due to our technology and the blatant disregard for the resources that we exploit, and toxic things that we create and release into nature as pollution have been very detrimental. One of the most detrimental ones that we're seeing right now, besides the toxic, fatal things, is the phytoestrogens that are being released into nature that are really damaging the endocrine systems of other species and affecting their ability to reproduce. It's very strange what we see going on right now, but some elephants are having a very difficult time because they're being exposed to phytoestrogens, and the male elephant penis has shrank to the point where they can't copulate properly anymore in some situations. And some female lions are growing a mane and developing hermaphroditism. So there's some strange things going on as a result of human intermingling with the natural environment with our strange technological ways. I feel like this is basically the mission that we have is to understand that we have a strong detriment in the terrestrial environment and try to work through it to a point where we can achieve mutually beneficial coping mechanisms that are going to be able to allow us to develop the instincts that we're going to need. Until we can develop something like that, I don't think that our subconscious mind is going to allow us to open up the inner eye in the waking state the way that animals seem to have been able to do in their waking state. I feel like they're able to tap in on instinctual understanding and problem solving answers when they come to a fork in the road, whereas we have to teach each other with words or writing what we're supposed to do, and then we might have questions that there might not be anyone there to answer or that we can't find in the writing, so we have to find someone we can ask. But I feel like it's easier for the animals to go through these situations because they're tapping into something deeper that's been cut off to us. And we do have an open inner eye in the dream state. And if you can get into like a deep trance in a meditative state, you can open up that inner eye. And I've had experiences, I don't know about you guys, have been able to go to other realms, have been able to go through and experience past life experiences and download them, explore the Akashic Hall of Records and be able to open that portal to be able to see those past lives. And the insights that come from it are very impacting, as starting to see some of the insights that, like, why am I being like this in this life? And maybe it has something to do with what I was doing in that life. And which ties back to what I was saying earlier about these strange fears that we develop that we doesn't seem to have any root in our experiences here. But like my father, for example, is deathly afraid of blood. And if he sees it, he'll faint and pass out. So, and I think a lot of people are scared of certain things. Some people are scared of guns. Some people are scared of knives. And I've always liked the idea that that has a lot to do with, like, maybe that's because in your past life, that's how you died, maybe one time or maybe more. And so, to me, that intuitively makes a lot of sense because it's not something that the whole family has. It's usually just the one individual. And so I always wonder, like, do people really get reincarnated like Dolores Cannon suggested in like a soul pod with a soul contract, and that these people that we're brought in with and our families and our friends are those people that we used to know in past lives? And if they were, maybe people will be more likely to share some of those fears because they died together in a tragic situation and be scared of the same thing. But you really don't see too much of that. Usually people are scared of one thing, and every individual in the family is scared of different things. So it's really curious to me. But I know that there's some insight about people that believe in the past lives and reincarnation, about like what culture seems really familiar to you and you seem to have insight of, even if you've never really even been there. It just seems to make sense. It might tie into where you were from in past lives. And I feel like there's probably something to that. Intuitively, it makes a lot of sense to me because being in the barbarian world for me is a bit strange. I feel like the Asian world makes way more sense to me. So in the Oriental, like, lifestyles and fashion and means of being, to me, are way more intuitive than this barbarian ways. So I've always been like really questioning of like, why are we like this? What is going on? How can I get out of this? I want to go back to Asia. And so I've been like really deeply involved in ancient philosophical Taoism, Kung Fu. I'm trying to learn ninjutsu right now. I've always worn like parachute pants when I was younger and like Jankos because I like the free flowing kind of silk feel of like not restricted pants like we wear in the West, like these like denim jeans, which it's like, I'm not a motorcycle rider or a cowboy or a pioneer. Why do I need this thick pants to be like trying to like not even be able to lift my leg? And I boycotted blue jeans for decades in my life until I became 30. I didn't drink coffee or use blue jeans, and I was always against them. But it's just been so strange. I feel like I've really had a strong intuition that this is very unnatural for me to be in this place. I don't know.
I think one of the things, I wanted to jump on one thing about the reincarnation, because this is something I've been thinking about too. Like, what if a woman's reluctance to have sex and get pregnant is reflective of people in the Bardo realm being reluctant to reincarnate in this realm? Because I think about a lot of that question: is reincarnation forced or not? And one of the things that gives me hope is that kind of that idea that, Mother Nature, giving birth is painful. It's an unpleasant experience. So she's not going to, accept reincarnations, willy-nilly, because it's like in the same way that if you have a partner and you have a baby, you better make sure there's a commitment, because this is a big thing. And I think the universe is kind of the same way. It's kind of a burden to sort of bring us into this world. So I think from that insight, particularly, it gives me hope in the realization that, reincarnation isn't necessarily, forced. Like, because I think there's something kind of messed up about the idea of forced reincarnation. I don't know about you.
I think that's an interesting idea. The Dolores Cannon ideas and all of this story about contracts, I think it's more simple than that. I think it's harmonic resonance. I think we're in tune with the vibrational fields of consciousness that we're in tune with. And those other people that happen to be in tune with those fields of consciousness are in tune with, we're all in tune with the same thing. And it's a cosmic journey, and we journey through space and time. And as we change, other people change, but we don't change that much all at once. And if we do change that much all at once, maybe we change people more. But generally, we change small amounts, and the other people are changing bits and pieces as well. So it stands to reason, like in school, right? If you're getting the same grades and you're in the same subject choice, you're more likely going to be in the same class with the other kids, right? Unless you suddenly go from getting a C+ to an A+, then you'll be moved to the A+ class. Or if you suddenly switch subjects, you'll go to a different school class and you'll be with different kids. But in school, there's sort of a synergy that if you stay at the same point, you stay with the same kids. If you, like, I was in a few BOF classes and I moved up with all of those classes, even though I was like, I don't belong here. I'm not a BOF. I don't do homework. I don't do schoolwork. But there were certain subjects that I was good at, like English, physics, languages and physics. I had a natural aptitude for those kind of subjects. So I would always be in the top set for that. But and languages, but then like subject like geography, I'd be in the low set for that, because I was like, I'm not opening these books. You must be crazy. It's a waste of time. History, I was like, I refuse to ever open that book. So until I dropped history, I was with the same set for 3 years, and I think like it works a little bit like that. I think there's been so much nonsense about soul contracts and how we choose to come back here, and that we've got all. I think that's a lot of nonsense.
I have quite a few things I've been waiting on bated breath. Because it's all connected to all this. Going back to my Anunnaki statement, I wanted to revisit that in an understanding. Because you see, the Anunnaki isn't just something that happened at the dawn of our new continuity of post-Atlantis, Younger Dryas era civilization. It's happening right now. GMO food, all the stuff we're talking about. So we can't rationalize that they're doing us a favor unless we're rationalizing that they're doing us a favor right fucking now. Because this whole conspiracy, Jeffrey Epstein's genetic engineering plot, this is the cult of Baal Lilith. This is how they are making their chattel into chattel, consistently de-evolving us, consistently have us attempting to escape the matrix using their matrix, and perpetuating epigenetically all these problems. These problems distort our frequency, which lowers our soul integrity when we die. And remember, reincarnation is not just here and back again. Which realm? You don't just get knocked back into a human body here. You may have to spend some time as a hungry fucking ghost, which is basically hell. You see that, like, there's rules. You don't always reincarnate as a man. Well, maybe there's a plague of locusts because of all the abortions and all these little babies, little baby consciousness can all fit into a single hive mind. And that's a revenge plot, right? There's all sorts of things in the mythos we can talk about. We are operating on metaphysical systems that have been distorted by Sumerian, Babylonian practices that became the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah was given to us as something that supports the rest of the fall of man since we lost the paradise. This is why I'm big on the eternal tree of life instead of the Sephiroth, which is why I care about the true Enneagram versus the Gurdjieff fucking trapezoidal Enneagram. This is the because this is about saying no, the Anunnaki were wrong for doing this. What they have done is that they have given us the lockdown version of the Ubermensch that we are. That's why there's all these issues with chakra blowouts and people wanting to close their chakras and fucking up their whole spiritual flow because they're trying to fucking life hack all their fucking little problems with energy play, which, like, you know, this thing, the chakra system, the Kundalini system is a choking vine on the original tripartite soul system, which then goes into the entire psychosocial, psychosomatic northern soul complex, which is the 9 of your soul. They don't want you integrated like this. And they don't want you integrating properly, which is to say you need to be in the 3-6-9 alignment. You know, there's a numerological correspondence with the magic that you're doing. I'm still working that out, and why I lean on the Keylontic in that manner, right? So we can compensate maybe with all these microplastics. I'll have wonderful semi-synthetic superpowers that I can be grateful for on my 10th reincarnation, and I forgot how good it was to be a natural, organic, carbon-based fucking life form. My soul was happier in this skin suit. Right? What do? You fight it now. You make your choices now. You stop using their poison, including their magic. Or their proposed counter magic, which is to run into fucking like Christianity and strip yourself of all of it to be all pure, or whatever fucking Puritan Islam they've invented. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to kind of tie back to something I was talking about earlier in regards to how Christianity and Judeo-Christianity actually views the universe in this kind of a mechanistic structure. Because I think it's important to recognize, I've been thinking about this lately, that from the perspective of like the people who wrote the Bible, they essentially looked at the universe being modeled like a city, because these were essentially a kind of a urban, suburban population or whatever. They had, like, you know, and there's a town and a civilization. And then because of that, we assume the rest of the universe works in that kind of bureaucratic, functional sort of way where there's rules, there's leaders, you know, there's administration. I kind of look at the universe more like a forest. Like, I've been thinking about this, like the archetype of the dark forest, and that's a more accurate sort of depiction of what the nature of reality is, because I think if we can't get back to that more organic, primordial, wild understanding of reality and nature, I don't think we have the capacity to reclaim it. Because one of the things I've been realizing with a lot of belief systems is that it actually warps and distorts your perception as to what nature is. Because you think about it from a Christian perspective, you're basically trained to think that this kind of mechanistic, bureaucratic universe is natural. And then you think, oh, this is what nature is, and you don't question it. But I think what the Fae have been kind of teaching me, just like looking at nature as something that's ultimately mysterious and difficult to define, that's what gives it its freedom and flexibility to sort of be, what it is and live out, all of its potential. So I think in a lot of ways, like you think about how narratives and our stories basically shape our perception of our existence, literally like manifesting these worlds, from our imagination. I think that the importance of getting to something more wild, because like when it comes to spirituality and stuff, I've taken some very drastic changes to how I view the universe. And I think it really functions more like a kind of forest than a city. I don't know, maybe that's a controversial position to take, but that's kind of how I generally feel about things. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
I think that's an interesting perspective, and I think there's definitely a lot of room for that. And there's no doubt that, like Zerilat, like you were pointing out, we're being downgraded. And I mean, it's on every level, like you say. Like, let's think about the arm prick adventure of 2020, right? That has affected our ability to breed, and the numbers are able to now be seen. So, percentage chances of young
also
people
on top of the way it becomes selective breeding, right? As an unjabbed, I have very, very, very strong feelings about making a child with a woman who at least was recently jabbed. I have a feeling that you can kind of, if you've done the work, get those genetics out of you, right? So I'm not condemning somebody who's done it, but if you've still accepted it, then it's integrated and corrupted, right? It's just, so it's not just like that, right? Like, so now I have all sorts of people that I disqualify who I would otherwise.
I think you rightfully should. I think it's the right thing to do. Because you why should your kid not be healthy? And why should you have a child with like inherent illness? Something wrong with them.
I may have the absolute strongest feelings for her too. I might be breaking my own heart in that respect, right? Because I'm not that guy who's also going to be like upfront. It's like, before we proceed, it's just like, I'm going to have to like fucking take my time with the date, unless.
Why do you always want to use condoms?
Right. Unless, of course, she's already on frequency, and then it's comfortable, because I don't know if she was on frequency before or after the incident, whenever somebody cares to fucking wake up.
Dude, I don't envy you at all. It's a sad and scary thought. I'm glad I'm like at the point now where I'm like, well, I don't really want to have any more kids. I've got one kid, that's enough. I'm done.
Right. You've
me out. Done.
It's already solved. I'm still fucking playing the field, man.
I'm tapped out, dude. My girlfriend's tapped out. She's had a kid. She's like, I didn't. I've done my 18 years. It's like, where do I sign? I'm done now. I don't want to do that again. And rightfully so. And it gets easier when we get older. But this is a problem for young people. It's a massive problem, and they get stigmatized if they don't want to have a baby with someone who is vaccinated. And I'm like, no, that's unfair. Like, people have free choice. It's like, I have nothing against people with Down syndrome, nothing at all. But I wouldn't want to have a baby with a woman who has Down syndrome, because the complications for my child, right? And it's not because I don't like people with Down syndrome or I think there's something wrong with them. I just wouldn't want my child to have to suffer, which is a natural thing,
Exactly.
So,
this is like last year. Last year, everybody tried to bite RFK Jr.'s head off because he was trying to to put a stop to autism. And so they decided to play with that on the idiots and say he's trying to euthanize the autistic people. He's trying to force them to be not autistic anymore, right? You know, like with some sort of imaginary horror science because Trump's a Nazi or something, right? And which is not what the fucking thing was that was going on with any of that. But that's the projected fear of the matter, because this is the mindset that is carrying this epigenetic fucking collapse.
I somehow think though that we will get through it, because I think like this might sound like harsh, but okay, so I do want to get back to the fool's journey. Let's not forget. I'll keep the picture on the screen just so we don't forget. But this is very interesting topic you bring up. Like, and this is quite relevant in a way to evolution. We're talking about evolution here. I think we're going down a road where we're going to split. I think we're going to have two different groups. That's what I think, and I think that we're going to have. I think we're going to have, you know. I think we're going to have one group of people that go back to nature, and we let our tackle hang out, and we run into the bushes, breasts bouncing, tackle jingling, less clothes, fur, wildness, nature. And then there's going to be another group of people, and we'll probably go and like start alternative communities, you know, grow our own food, get back down to nature, clean our own water, just decide like, you know, stay away from that place where all the robots are. And then you'll have the other people that'll be like, where do I get my chip? Like, sign me up. Oh, I'll get a good job if I got a chip. Where do you put it? In there. Good. Oh, I need one of those upgrades. Stick it in. Oh, what? I need a new organ now because I've been eating your food. Okay, stick it in. What? Synthetic organs? Yeah, well, robotic organs. Just stick them in. One group of humanity will become a cyborg / new, I don't know what to call them, like android human beings. Literally. Android, where's my phone?
Well, yes.
Become one of these human beings.
Cyborg is when you got flesh and machine operating together. The most inhuman extreme is like the Terminator, where the flesh is merely for appearance. And then you've got like DC Comics Cyborg, which is like all humanity with enhancements.
Yeah, exactly. And then there'll be the other group, which I imagine will be us lot and the people in the chat who will be like we're not having that. Like, I'll rather go and live in the bushes.
It's like, just like
I'll be a bushman with a stick making fires over that, and humanity will evolve in two directions. And that one will die off.
With it's making me think of H.G. Wells' Time Machine, when he goes like 9,000 years in the future, and humanity is split into the Eloi and the Morlocks. One races are like these kind of like these like hippie, you know, nature people. Then the Morlocks are like these cave dwelling cannibalistic monsters. And I think that kind of reminds me of what you're talking about, Franklin.
Well, it wasn't even that they were hippies, but they were gentrified, which has hippie.
They were cattle, essentially. Yeah,
I mean, like they're peace. Like they don't have enough of their own intelligence of things, because they're just at it. Like they're in a communist like breeding ground, right? They're a breeding ground for the Morlocks, right? So I mean, yeah, they're peaceful like the hippies and all that, but they're not like dirty hippies. They have like, they're very clean, and they're very docile. They don't have like, I don't think they have like wild music. They're also all illiterate and don't know what a book is. I'm remembering the movie, not the book, but the movie I believe was faithful to the book, so I believe I'm on point. So like, they're illiterate, their books are crumbling, and then the other side, that they're also illiterate, but they're very good with industrial machines. Right? They're like, you know, it's orcs, and you know, the orc was based on the Neanderthal, the cannibal, you know, the cannibals that hunted Cro-Magnon, to extinction, right? This monstrous order of men. All right. That's the Anunnaki weaponizing their breeding program. So they were doing us no favors because they took other kinds of men and turned them into Neanderthals and sicked them against man. Tolkien knew what the fuck he was talking about.
You know, I think there's a lot of this out there that we're going to find. A lot of these mythos is going to be carrying a lot of like essential truths. And to me, it seems like this is where we're heading. And those of us that will develop spiritual abilities, and those of us that will develop technological abilities, those that will become augmented and develop psychic abilities due to augmentation, and those that will evolve. I think there's a natural balance within the universe. And so like nature will take care of itself, right? Because so many humans will become degenerative, more humans will become exceptional. And I think there's a balance, right? If all the humans are healthy, then there'll be less exceptional humans. If many humans become degenerative, you'll have more exceptional human beings, because I think there's a status quo that nature will maintain. And it's built into our breeding, right? If a lot of the breeding pool becomes like really, really like messed up genetics, then you'll find that there will be some beings that will have like exceptionally good genetics, and they will outbreed the others because nature will want to bring the best that nature can have into existence. And nature has her own plan and her own consciousness and her own existence through us. And so we see this in the wild, and I think we will see this unless it's like heavily interfered with. This is sort of naturally what would happen. So I think what will happen is that those that become exceptional will be what we're speaking about in all these predictions of like the super uber humans that will come back to humanity and come back to Earth will come back here because of the degeneration that we're talking about. And the degeneration will be, you know, those that say like, yes, stick them in chips. Where do I sign? Oh, you're gonna make my brain better. Oh, that sounds like fun. Where do I sign? Oh, you can give me better arms and legs. Just put them all in. Put them in. Yeah, put them all in. You know, there'll be people that will just be enamored by all this nonsense, and they'll lose their authenticity and their biological identity. And with that, they'll lose their spiritual identities, and they will become ghosts in the machine. I think they will become that. And so I think like we're in a very special time where we are on the precipice of a wave of a splitting of humanity. Those of us that will, and those of us that won't. And I think that the time of the jabs is like a great. They're preparing us for something. I think it was a psychological tool to see if they can get humanity to go along with something. And like they're testing us, like, okay, we got them at that level. We got to play with them a little. We got to rubber them up, soften them up so we can get them ready to like take whatever it is we want them to take. And just looking at how far they've progressed with the robotics, it seems very clear that in order to get jobs in the future, you will have to be able to interact with AI and robotics. You'll have to have a chip in your head. I think we're about 10 years away from that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I think they're trying to push us into that direction as well. I feel like it's going to backfire on them, but this is really a lot based on premonitions that I've had and consensus of different psychics and remote viewers and telepaths and prophets that there's really going to be a strong death toll from a cataclysm that's coming up soon, that's looming in our future, possibly as a result of the climate changing, whether that's from human activity or from some kind of atmospheric thing that's going on with the magnetosphere. When the magnetosphere weakens, it will allow more ultraviolet radiation to come through the atmosphere, which could cause this global warming situation. Some people have speculated that's from the sun, but regardless, there's also the Hopi prophecy that the Kachina blue is going to appear in the sky, and that the fire will rain with, or the sky will rain with fire, the sea will run red with blood, and something big is going to happen on all the global coastlines. It's going to shut down modern society, and the urban center is going to be depopulated by 2050. So I feel like as much as they're trying to make this happen, I feel like it's going to be averted somehow by Mother Nature. And if that doesn't happen, I feel like you're right. You're spot on, Franklin. What they're really trying to do is they're trying to push us in the direction of, at least in America, they've been last year in 2025, they had every city contribute 10% of their revenue to the federal government to implement CCTV here in America, so that they can eventually put numbers over our heads with facial recognition to discern whether we should be allowed into certain buildings and stores, and like is going on in China. So they're really trying to push this technology on us. I mean, I moved away from Rhode Island because if you pull up over the white line at a stoplight, they send a ticket to you in the mail. A traffic ticket comes to you in the mail, which affects your insurance costs, and puts like another tally on your license for stuff that you've done in trafficking, and not in trafficking, in traffic violations. So that a lot of this technology has come to become like a profiteering scheme, so that they can use it as a way to like see people, recognize their face, and like make it so that they're barred from certain places, and limit our opportunities in society, make us more desperate, or like prefer certain people that are allowed to go anywhere because they have a higher financial situation, so that they should be allowed to spend more money. Whereas the people that are like causing more trouble and have less funds are not going to be allowed to do certain things. It's really kind of creating like a segregation in our society. This advanced technology is
it's an answer to a segregation. Think about what's happened to New York. New York has created its own self-segregation because everybody that was for the way of life that New York was up until basically the Trump derangement syndrome era started. They all bailed. Investment bottomed out. Kinds of people that are attracted to New York are deterred from going there. Everything within the nation and the world, a lot of it is being deeply affected by the manner in which it has been a microcosm, semi-city state of socialism since Mamdani started breaking everything down and bleeding it out of what's left of the wealthiest income makers in the city, as you're watching those economics just collapse on their face, as a product of the democracy not adhering to the consequences of the republic, right? Because it's acting like a democracy, but we're not a democracy. We have a democratic process to a republic. That's what we do. And so it's already segregated as basically it's turning into already a communist bloc, right? It's turning into an escape from New York situation. Low trust society doesn't want cops. They're not invited, and they don't want to deal with it in their own right. Everybody, just there isn't anybody's going to respond. Who's going to have the bravery when you got like a thug with a gun, and then you just complain about like gun laws instead of fucking doing your duty of making a free and safe environment for you to live, right? So it's segregated itself, and it's becoming a threat to itself and the people around it. And unfortunately, one of the main reasons why these conspiracy systems persist is because it is very, very hard to shake people in their fucking little worlds from understanding what freedom they're about to lose because of their petty love of their childish things, right? Like,
Yeah.
I could, when I was reading the Jewish War, I was picking up on the subtext because I could smell that there was like a privilege that they were getting from Rome with their lifestyle, that they were abusing the fuck out of, thanks to the manner in which they did their free range sacrifice all over the effing place, which had an effect on how they spent money, which had an effect on their ability to produce and make food, and everybody was starving. And the only reason why the Romans had such a struggle is because of Roman restraint trying to fucking spare these people from their apocalypse, right? Oh my God, the police state is coming. Well, that's all just saying, oh my God, Book of Revelations is about to happen. And for people on that program, it will exist for them, right? I'm not going to make the same mistakes I made living my life before the pandemic to be entrapped within it. That is why I'm doing everything I do now.
I think when it comes to, you were talking about waking people up. One of the things that I've noticed when it comes to certain belief systems is that, like, for example, when people talk about having a relationship with Christ, it is exactly that, a relationship. Because I've been thinking so think of it like this. Let's say, you're a guy, you don't really have a lot of success with women, and all of a sudden you meet some really hot girl. She's into you. She really likes you. You're like, all right, I got this hot girlfriend, and you're really super proud that she's with you. But then your friends will come and say, hey, that girl you're with, she kind of sleeps around a little bit, or maybe she did this thing or whatever. And your first reaction is going to be like, no, she didn't do that. She's this wonderful person. She loves me, because you want to believe that girl loves you. And then you realize that only when the person fully accepts that this woman is actually a bad person, do they then have the ability to objectively look at the situation and realize what's going on. And I think when it comes to religion and beliefs, it's the same thing. When a lot of one of the reasons why I think it's difficult for people to leave behind their proverbial belief system is that kind of emotional attachment to them, because they may think, well, this religion, it may be nonsensical, it may be kind of crazy, but at least the God in that text genuinely loves me and cares about me, right? And because you think that this deity cares about you and loves you, you're always going to try to rationalize, you're always going to try to come up with the excuses for why, oh, God did that terrible thing and killed those people because there was a purpose behind it. But only when you're able to look at it and accept that, this God actually is tyrannical and terrible and probably doesn't care about me and probably will send me to hell. It's only from that point of view can you really look at the thing objectively and say, okay, this is where the contradiction is for. Because I realize that when you have that emotional attachment to that delusion, you almost become blind to the contradictions. It's almost like the light of your desire sort of makes it harder to see because it's so bright, all the faults and the problems and the contradictions and all of those things. So I think, and the other aspect of belief systems is the communal aspect. A lot of people, they may think, that this belief system doesn't make sense. I think these ideas are unethical. But in that situation, giving up these beliefs also means giving up your friends, giving up your family, giving up your community that you take care of. And sometimes people will put up with a dumb belief system because they want to stay with that community. So I think when it comes to understanding these ideas and why people are stuck in the way they are, I think you first have to tackle it from that emotional dimension before you get to that intellectual, philosophical dimension. Because I think only when you can accept the fact that, something is wrong and something is problematic, only then do the contradictions and the inconsistencies actually become visible in your perception. Because if you're looking at the thing with rose-tinted glasses, with sentimentality, you might not necessarily be honest with yourself and honest with the situation that you're in. And a lot of the contradictions and the lies, you come up with all these sort of elaborate, mechanisms to try to justify that. So I think to answer that question of like waking up is that you have to consider that, a lot of these people, they have these emotional attachments to these beliefs. And I think you have to kind of shake them out of their sleep and realize these beings that you think care about you don't actually care about you. And that can be a very difficult thing to accept, but that's kind of how it is with any like abusive relationship. Like if you've been with I don't know, if you had an abusive parent or an abusive partner, an abusive boss, you're in that kind of dynamic where there's that kind of that push and pull of maybe I like this person, maybe I don't. And it's only when you can kind of like put it down and say, you know what, this God of the Bible is a jerk. Only then can you actually notice the contradictions. Otherwise, and if not, you won't see them.
It's like when you keep following guys like, no disrespect to the dead here, but this is an important thing that has to be said, and it's the right time to say it. Like David Wilcock just passed away, understood as a publicly and police witnessed suicide that happened outside or something like that. Don't entirely know what's up with that. And here he was kind of like on his next cycle of, listen, man, I'm really close to like some disclosure over here. And I'm just like broski, you trusted Corey Good. The Blue Chickens have forsaken you. Like you framed it with all these kinds of certainties. And it's just like, like whatever authorities in the quiet that he always talked about, saying, oh, my source is this, that, and the other thing, they kind of just led you into an absurd little hole where everybody just thinks you're absurd. Right. Because you can only have a conversation with weird people. You're not cultivating like not that you have to fucking be amongst the quote profane, but you have to understand like where your engagement with the public is actually at, and are you even capable of bridging communicatively what the hell you're trying to say? Because right now people just think you're weird because of your Blue Chickens and your dude who faked his whole thing that you stood by for way too effing long and then got into a very ugly public whatever about it. But psychosis, here you are still going, right? And then you finally and then you just die like that, right? You allegedly said, I'm not suicidal, and then boom, and then you went off. And whether that was something or not, it's just like, why were you so isolated?
I don't want to get too into that, but you bring up some really interesting points.
Yeah.
I do want to get into the conversation about the archetypes and sort of tie a knot with that into these things. And I wanted to look at the association between the personal and the extra personal, where we've got the minor arcana, which is the macrocosmic forces, and the major arcana, which are the relationships between these forces that we experience as personal reality. And I totally agree that Wilcock was definitely, he didn't do it himself. However, that doesn't mean he didn't do it himself. Manchurian candidate. I'm just saying, who knows? Like, and as to why,
driven. To be honest with you, I think they
yeah. But anyway, like that beside the point. The question of why is it its own story? Like sometimes what's needed is to run interference. And to be honest, I stopped watching David Wilcock 2 decades plus ago because the dude just went too far out. I was just like, okay, dude, you lost me 2 years ago, dude. In the beginning, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and then he started dressing up with all the funny clothes and stuff. And he was like this prayer guy. And I was like, oh gosh, this guy's like, quickly, where's my nearest bucket? I can't watch this dude without a bucket because I need something to vomit into. And because it was just so inauthentic. But anyway, I think he believed he was being authentic, but it just wasn't. So yeah, I mean that's its own story. But looking at the all important archetypal images here, which I think is quite relevant when we're looking at ourselves, because these principles, like this journey. Okay, so without getting too caught up into it, you'll find people trying to run it from the fool to the world, which is like the wrong way around. We're talking about inversion. We need to take into relation that the journey starts in the world, and we're journeying towards that, which is the magician. The magician is that like final, I've reached that level of full awareness and awakening. And when the fool gets to the magician, the fool is complete, and then you are the fool. Fool is that aspect of the inner child. But the fool, you see here, it's in the first, but the fool's also at the end. So for any major arcana, the fool will be in the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega, effectively. And the fool obviously has no number. So, to run through it very quickly and notice the important position of Libra, right? Libra holds that all important position here, because you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you've got Libra, which is justice, which is the 11th card. Now, why is the 11th card there? Why is this? Hold on. What's going on here? Okay, the way the cards are done is interesting. So it goes 1, 2, 3, then it goes 4, 5, 6, 7. So just for those of you that are keeping track, the way that the arcana have been represented here is not optimal, because it's not going like in a logical format, but it's 1, 2, 3 is on the left up until the Empress, and then the Emperor, and then the Hierophant, and then Justice, and then the Chariot, right? And then after the Chariot, we go to the Hermit, and then we go to the Wheel, and then we go to Justice. So just to give you an impression, we're going from 1 to 10. The Wheel is 10, right? Then we have Justice, the 21st card today, numbers 2 and 1, 1 and 2. It's the number 3. Then we've got the next 10 that follows, right? The next 10 that follows is from, let's see if we can see these numbers easy so that everyone can sort of get a grasp of it. I don't know if you can see this, but 12, 13, 14, 15, right? And then 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So you've got 10 that goes from judgment. You've got 10 that goes from the world to the tower, to the devil, to the hanged man. And the hanged man obviously is number 12. And then the hanged man represents exactly that, the hanged man. The hanged man transcends. Justice is the pivot of justice. So you've got 10 before and 10 after. It's just important to recognize that Libra justice holds a very important point. It's the scales of balance, but it happens to sit exactly in the middle of the major arcana. So when we look at the journey of ascent, because this represents a serpent, represents the serpent that is reaching up. The caduceus is 2 of these serpents, and these 2 serpents represent the polarities that are being expressed in this particular set of relationships. So if we run through it very quickly, you're in the world and you achieve a worldly kind of a success. And once you've sort of squared the world away, you're like, well, what next? I've done my life. I've got my family sorted. What is next? You start questioning things. The questioning brings about a fiery aspect within yourself. You start judging things, right? The judgment comes, you start exercising judgment. You start deciding, you know what? Is this all there is? What's this world about? What is this life about? Then you start looking within yourself more deeply, and you get acquainted with the sun and the power of the sun. You notice there's this life force flowing through you. And this life represents the powers of your imagination that's empowering your world, the Maya. And when you start to recognize that like much of what we think is reality is in our minds, is empowered by our conscious assertion of reality, we then get into a very tricky a tricky patch of terrain, which takes us to the moon. And that's Pisces. And that's where we start to really go into understand, well, if much of reality is in my mind, right, the sun, then what does that mean about my mind? So we start going into the deep unconscious forces of the mind through the Pisces, the two fishes. And then we see the two dogs howling at the moon, representing Pisces in a sense. We see the moon is standing, looking between the two towers. That means that you're moving towards us. You can see that you need to find the source of this polarity within your being. Why is some of me unconscious and some of me conscious? Why? Why is some of me hidden from me? Why can't I see who I am? Why do I have all these different characters that keep coming out? That takes us to the star. The star represents that aspect of ourselves where we start to get hope. We start realizing that there's more. We start realizing that there's some kind of a cosmic order. There's a cosmic order to the way things work. This universe is greater than our perception, and we're starting to understand some kind of nature of law. And that takes us to a point where we start getting quite cocky. And that cockiness normally leads us straight into the arms of transformation. But we're not transforming ourselves yet. We're into the arms of transformation. That's Aries. But it's not Aries. We're talking about the specific archetype that relates to Aries. We're talking about Mars. Mars brings us, as the Enneagram shows us, if we look at the Enneagram, Mars is that element that's going to take us through into a journey to go through negative space. So that number 9, that Martian power is going to take us right through the eye of the storm, the eye of the toric field, which is going to cause us to move and shift octaves to the next level. It's a very difficult energy to work with. It's war. We're at war with ourselves. We're at war with the world. We're at war with our nature. There's this profound forces of flux pushing and pulling us. We go through the eye of the storm, and there's this huge, massive transformation. And the 9 becomes Gandalf the White, right? We emerge as a new one, a new octave of the Enneagram. So this Enneagram gets taken out of existence, and it flashes back in, and it's the great proverbial, I think Gandalf the White is probably a good archetypal reflection of this concept as it relates to the process. Then as we move beyond this level, we then get to start noticing, hold on, I'm like pretty much stuck. My desires are controlling me. I am pretty much bound by my belief system. The beliefs and the ideas that I have about reality have got me chained down. Even though I know it's not real, I'm still stuck in this reality. And this becomes for us a problem. Vices start to flash up. We have to face our vices. When we get to this point, we often might be pulled off the path because of addictions or whatever, and or challenges. It could be that we start realizing just how big this story is that we've got to do, and we notice that we can free ourselves, but this is a challenge. So what do? We get lost in this element. This is this is the I. This is really the heart of Capricorn, right? That we're looking at right here. And this heart of Capricorn is in a polarized relationship with the star. The star is that optimistic side, the feminine side of Saturn, which is showing us that there's hope and positivity to build the world anew. But then we get to the harsh reality of time, and we start realizing that we are our own slavers. Even though we want to point the fingers at whoever's slaving us, it's really us that's allowing this process. And that takes us through a real challenging phase. And that challenging phase is what we would consider as temperance. That's Sagittarius. It tempers us. Saturn tempers you for wisdom. Because of the presence of Saturn and having to recognize these harsh realities of the world we're living in and within ourselves, that we are our own slavers, we thus start to temper ourselves towards wisdom. And that temperance of wisdom, which is the sage of Sagittarius with that arrow aiming straight at, where does the arrow of Sagittarius aims at? It aims at Antares. We then land in the card of Scorpio, transformation. And that transformation is the huge shift within ourselves where we start to actually transform. This is the process of the tower actually starting on an internal level. And that internalized process of transformation causes us to become a sacrificial. We sacrifice ourselves. And we get to the point where we realize that in order to move, we've got to, like a snake, one of the old symbols of Scorpio, we've got to allow ourselves to just be and allow ourselves to molt, allow our skin to fall off and have faith and trust. And that faith and trust, which comes from the new skin growing, that is Odin hanging on the Odin tree. That is allowing yourself to travel deep into the unconscious, deep through the spiritual realms, and the deep spiritual realms are going to bring us the benefits. Next, we move into the sphere of Cancer, the Chariot. Now we're able to expand our consciousness into the underworld, into the realms beyond, into the spiritual planes. We're able to travel through our macabre body, which is why, so the Chariot, we're starting to learn to wield the polarities of these powers, which is truly essentially magical power. This is the power of the moon. You'll see, if you look down, you see the moon card, which is Pisces. That's actually Jupiterian, but there's an element of Jupiterian energy that is related to that particular vibrational frequency, which is really coming out in this very powerful lunar energy because of the relationship between Luna and Zeus or Jupiter. So in this Chariot, we are then moving into our deep, finding our inner home, who we are in an emotional level, coming to terms with our emotional elements. And this causes us to emerge. This emergence is Gemini. This emergence is the twins. This emergence is starting to recognize that we are two different aspects of ourselves, and that we have within us the ability to take in and to give out. And this is the process of learning and developing our abilities. This is the undifferentiated magician. This is the process that will lead to magician, the house of Mercury, Gemini. And this power that we're starting to develop forces us to look at our forces of conditioning, Taurus, the tauric field that has conditioned us, this tube that we're running through. What is this tauric field? We are now facing these forces of conditioning within us. That's the Taurus card. That's the so-called priest, the Hierophant here, number 5. And we can see him sitting there. He's basically calling the shots. He's got everybody. We are those people kneeling at our church, our religious convictions, our ideologies, all of these things that have shaped us to become why we are stuck. That crystallized aspect of number 4 in the Enneagram, this is what we're dealing with. This then leads us to a very profound place. But in order to get to this place, we need to have received the balance, right? Now, the balance is the justice. Now, the justice is what gives us the impotence to be able to recognize that the universe within us is perfect and is an administration of perfect law. So along this path, we are polarizing ourselves with Libra. We're looking at our relationships. We're looking at how the people around us, how we're getting on with people, how we're finding ourselves to be changing who we are in relation. We are like balances. Where's my integrity? Where's my core integrity? I change when I'm with X. I change when I'm in Y. Why am I not one person? Why am I a different person for my employer, different person for my lover, different person for my child, different person for my animals, different person for my friends? Who are all these different characters that we've discovered in the sphere that we're going to bring together in a sense of unity? This then takes us to the wheel. And the wheel then is the turning of the new life. That's the new life. That's Jupiter in its pure form. That's pure expansion. That pure expansion will take us into a deep, 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 deep deep journey within ourselves. And that feminine polarization element, the hermit is working in conduit with the twins. These are two aspects of Mercury. So these two aspects of Mercury are in synergy. And so this process of learning that we're going into, and this is an inner learning of the spiritual, the knowledge and the light within us, and learning to actually tune in and learning to actually find the strength within ourselves, which is going to become the core integrity that's going to move us forwards and develop these magical spiritual powers. That is what we represent with the hermit. And that incredible power that we're seeing here is what's going to take us to the next level. That's what's going to take us to the point where we start to recognize and realize, hold on, we aren't what we think to be. We aren't what we seem to be. And this process is then going to take us to strength. And this strength process is going to bring within us this divine order, this divine potential, this divine strength that's going to lead us on a journey so that we can discover who we are, so that we can become aware of our potential, aware of the power that's moving through us. And this is fundamental. That's the maturity of this particular archetype right here, the sun. Because of the sun's process, the sun is driving us towards the strength right here, right? And the sun is the whole mission of this purpose is to get that inner strength, and that's your core integrity. That's who you are. That's going to take you to a higher level of being, and that higher level of being is going to awaken us. And it's that strength that is the head of the serpent that is going to open the door to this chariot, right? So you can see how important Libra is. Libra with these 3 steps are differentiated from all of the other, because these 3 steps that follow Libra are the same 3 steps of judgment, the sun, and the moon. And judgment, the sun, and the moon are the steps that step out of those 3 steps. So the world stepping into judgment, judgment stepping into the sun, and the sun stepping into the moon, right? And here we have justice stepping into the wheel of fortune stepping into the hermit, and the hermit stepping into the strength. And when we step through strength, we are at the chariot, and that is that awakening of that, as we said, that spiritual ability to transcend matter. So strength is the key to that, because the strength of character gives us a character, our character, our ability to move, our ability to transcend physical space. And the Hierophant leading us to the Emperor is the key to our personal power. And that is the number 9. So this is the maturity of the transformation of the card of death, which is an expression of the tower. So the tower starts the process, the transformation of the death card takes us through that journey. That journey is personified by these steps that leads us to the Emperor. And that's when that journey has come to conclusion. And the conclusion of that journey is, I am now who I am. I've become my own fundamental sense of personal power has been unveiled, and I am in charge of myself. And you can see here, we look at the Emperor. What is the Emperor holding? He's holding that sphere in his right hand. Often he's holding the ankh, or the staff that represents life, in his right. So he's holding the sphere in his left hand. And that sphere represents the world, represents having domain over yourself, the different aspects of yourself. You've now developed that aspect of martial self-control, and that martial self-control is a reaction to the devil, is a reaction to the contemplations of Saturn that has taken us to this temperance of the sage. And the temperance of the sage has brought us through this process of transformation that has culminated in this Emperor. And so this Emperor then, number 4, is going to lead us into bringing the divine gifts of nature, that which is those aspects within us, our Venus potentials will be liberated. And the Venus potentials have got to do with the psychic abilities and the psychic spiritual gifts, the gifts of nature, the gifts within us that will align us with nature. And there is that incredible power of the Visuddhi chakra becoming open. And there's an element of truth that will also live, hence she holds that scepter. And that scepter, you notice on the top of the scepter, there's that ball that the emperor holds. So there's something quite interesting there. And she's actually wielding that. The emperor is not wielding it. The emperor is sitting on his thing. He's less active. She's sitting on a throne, but she's almost standing. She's almost active. She's not quite active. But notice around her, all the abundance and all the growth. That is the true emotional liberation and the growth coming. And that takes you to inner initiation. That inner initiation is when we start to recognize that we aren't who we think we are. And that's where we get introduced to our true spiritual self. And that true spiritual self liberates all the personal power, all of the intense potential that we've been building up falls under total self-control, and we start recognizing just who we are. And that's what the magician represents. The magician represents that intense power, that intense potential, and that is essentially where we end up with the pure state of Mercury. And that is the alchemical Mercury, the Mercury of the alchemists. That is that potential to change us from one dragon to another till we reach that high level. And now the fool, we are the fool in this journey. The entire tarot pack collapses into this point. And once the entire tarot pack collapses into this point, we are now the magician and we are in the world. And the magician in the world now needs to navigate through the world. And so it's like, in a sense, it's the entire enneagram having been collapsed into itself. And in the process of the enneagram being collapsed into itself, it travels back through the center of that zone, and it's emerging into a new cycle because of octave. And so that's sort of like synapses, a very short, very rushed. I haven't really put too much details in, trying not to make it too long, but that's the basic ideas in a nutshell that relates to essentially what we're talking about with the major arcana. And the major arcana then becomes this process of personal relation. Now, the forces that are operating in this major arcana, that in itself is a very interesting thing to look at, because you'll see that these forces operate in stages of 3, right? And you can see it here quite clearly if you look at it, right? So if we want to go like, okay, we've got the world, we've got judgment, and we've got the sun, right? So the world is like a portal that you're stepping through into. Judgment is that mental sort of awakening, asking the questions that you need to question, that you need to start looking at, like, what is the point of this? The sun is when we are starting to get a grip on understanding just exactly what our relation is into the world. Now we start the next cycle of 3. We now have to go deeper into the unconscious. That deeper into the unconscious brings about that positive Aquarius energy, which is a hopeful potential and a potential to be able to recognize the information flowing in and out. And that leads us to that power, the tower. And so the tower and the moon are like a beginning and an ending of a cycle. And the tower represents, in a sense, what the sun represents, but it's the dark side of it. It's the polarity. And by dark, I don't mean evil. I mean the unconscious. But it's the conscious recognition, because in the first 10 steps, we are dealing with the more surface area of our consciousness. And in the next 10 steps after justice, we're dealing with the much more sublime and subtle spiritual forces. So looking at this tower, it looks like a bad card. And look at the sun, it looks like a good card, but the sun brings with it a lot of egotism. And that egotism of the sun causes this collapse. So it's basically balancing each other out. And then in the same way as the world, we were addicted to the world, we're now addicted. We're addicted to all of these processes that we're recognizing. And so the devil and the sage of temperance, which is like the yogas and the sadhanas that we do, will take us towards that intense field of transformation. And that transformation is the 3rd step that relates to the sun, the tower, and transformation, which is quite interesting. The sun, Mars, you see how important Mars is in all of these processes. And so that then takes us to this fairly intense sort of level of understanding and recognizing just exactly where we are. And then from there, we go sitting on this real precipice of power, right? We go into the Hanged Man, where we then start our next cycle. And the Hanged Man is a very intense place to be, because we are now sort of sacrificing ourselves, the inner sacrificial, and this pivots, right? This pivots. So we're pivoting around justice as a central point. And this self-sacrifice, which is probably the wrong word to use for it, is more to do with like allowing ourselves to experience that which is within us that's out of sync, in order for it to be brought into alignment so that we can understand our place in this field of time. Because you see the T behind us there. Notice that 1, 2, 3, 1. You see the T, it aligns with the Saturn here. So you'll see there's even planetary, so these are the macrocosmic forces being expressed through these cycles of 3. And that then takes us into the Venus field, right? Libra. And that Libra field then causes us to seek balance, Saturn, Venus, and then Zeus, Jupiter. Jupiter, the world, the Wheel of Fortune, that is the card for Jupiter. And that's the benediction and the expansiveness of mind and the expansive creative potential that will come as a result of the Hanged Man pivoting around this point. And this will then take us to the next cycle of Mercury, Virgo. And so the Virgo aspect of Mercury starts the next cycle. And that cycle then takes us into a deep sort of deep place of sort of recollection, of finding out exactly what is our inner light, who am I, that question, knowledge, studying the sacred texts, studying the esoterics, which is why Hermes is related to the sign of Virgo. It's why the sign of Virgo is very important for Hermetics. They celebrate important things because it has to do with studying knowledge. There's 7 Hermetic principles, understanding the cosmic law. Virgo, Mercury's feminine side, takes us into the next cycle. And once again, we're touching the sun. So we're touching the sun here once again in the same way that we were touching the sun. In the same way that we were touching the sun. Where were we touching the sun? Where were we touching the sun? Yes, we're touching the sun in strength down here. And we were also touching the sun in a not so direct way. But when we're talking about the card of transformation, even though it represents Mars, Mars and the sun have this very powerful relationship. Mars acts as an ambassador, carrying this power of the sun, of life force, which is the key to Scorpio. Hence, Scorpio rules the genitalia, and the genitalia is where our Jing manifests all of our pranic life force energy. And that's is like the main gates of life, if you will. Hence, that's where new life has to come from. New souls have to enter into the world, even though the prana, this is which causes all green things to grow. In the human being, it's closely associated with the potential of Mars because of that potential to transform because of our free will. And free will being the domain of Mars, will being the domain of number 9, 9 being an expression of this will, and the completion of that will's work, shall we say. This is quite relevant. So where were we?
I actually had something I wanted to add, and I was going to actually log off because I want to do some things before I got to do my thing tonight. So 2 things. One thing I wanted to just talk about. You got that cycle where you're basically coming around to the point where you master the magician instead of technically kind of like starting at the magician. And thinking about the way you describe that, I like that a lot because there's a way in which the magician can be read in a reading contextually as being a trickster. Like, this guy, he razzle dazzled you with what he brought to table, right? Like that can be an interpretation depending on the context of the reading. But the idea that perhaps your journey starts because you see a magician that isn't you, but it's kind of like foreshadowing who you are, or foreshadowing that you will be the adversary magician to this magician. You see that a lot in the storytelling, and then you come back around. an interesting thing is in certain esoteric deconstructions, and I adhere to these, is that the feminine precedes the masculine, and that they had to construct the first three, 4 cards of the tarot major arcana this way because of the issues of publishing it in its time. When they originally were doing this with like the French and the Visconti decks, all the early stuff. So you would put the high priestess in the 1 position, because then you've got the androgynous fool who goes to the female high priestess, to the male magician, to the empress, to the emperor, in that pattern. And so you're going female to male to female to male, so on in the beginning, because the first set there is also representing generative principle as well. Right. So I think that there's actually, depending on who's reading, who the messaging of the card is for, that as a man, it is appropriate to have the magician in the 1 spot. I think if it's the card is for a woman, that she can consider in the work the high priestess as that 1 card, and that there's a little bit of a play there between those first 2, and just those first 2, depending on who the cards are helping. And then the last thing I was going to say is the Fool and the Sun. I distinctly believe that the Fool and the Sun are like the same guy, that because the Fool is also the soul, and he's a sun-oriented card because of the sun in the corner that points at his staff, right? And so you look at the sun. I've always interpreted the kid on the horse coming over the wall with all the sunflowers, like that's the baby New Year. There's the baby New Year mythos. They do a whole like after Christmas special with Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, and he has to save baby New Year to make sure he gets in before the old New Year is out. Otherwise, like, I think the world comes to an end or something. So it's the classic that they made after the original Rudolph. Anyway, you see, he's got the horse becomes the dog because as the spirit guiding animal once he's through, and then his spear turns into his travel stick. He wraps up the flag into the holding bag, and I think that's something. I think there's something to that, where you've got the you come in and you've got all this power. Here's your spear and your great flag that all means a thing. But then by the time you're out in the world, now you're kind of in rags. You're still kind of figuring out your identity. You've had to like wrap up all of your feelings, which kind of like, that's kind of like what this flag is kind of representing, into a ball and carry it on your shoulder as you explore, and as well as engaging in some of life's delights, because you have to stop and smell the flowers, don't you know? And so I think that there's this correlation between the sun and the fool in that respect that I've thought about for a long time. And I think there may be aspects that kind of morph for all of them, including and especially with the hermit. Anyway, I'm going to get going. Was there anything you wanted to respond to me about that, or because I can wait a second?
Yeah, brother. I like that. It's obvious to me that the fool is the fool is everybody, like in the entire journey, the different stages of the fool. But there's a particularly strong association with the sun. Obviously, that inner child on the horse is the fool. Though the fool, the sun represents prana, right? Represents the life force. Literally the life force, that inner principle of life force. The fool represents the ability of life force to permeate throughout all things. So both of those cards are talking about life force. Like from a perspective of the three worlds, you would say that the Fool represents the forces of creation, the formative, creative. No, not creative. The formative forces. So the forces that form reality, matter. That's the Fool. The Fool manifests through the Fool manifests the minor arcana, and that relationship of minor arcana coming out through the Fool's wanderings is because of the sun. That because of the principle of prana and life force within our bodies, that's what connects us to the macrocosm. So there's a definite, intense synergy between these two, without a doubt. The Fool represents the element of air, for example, and the sun represents obviously the sun, right? But when we look at the sun, it might be fire, but it also is very reminiscent of the potentials of the element of air, because the sun is the source of all of the polarization, and the element of air represents that ability to polarize, which is the heart chakra, which in Taoism they actually differentiate the air into metal and wood. Speaking about this polarizing potential, they actually take it all the way out and they say, well, let's just speak about it as two personalities, one pole and one pole. Instead of speaking of the element of air, we'll just speak of wood and metal, and we'll understand the wood and metal are the polarities of air. And so that polarizing ability of the sun's power, which generates the electrical fields of polarity, is the reason why the Fool is able to permeate the entire system. The Fool is permeating, is traveling through all of these. He's like you're breathing it through every oracle, every hole, every spiracle. So there's definitely that. And with the high priestess, what I would say is this: the high priestess is in the form of the world. So when you are going into the process, you have to travel through the feminine, right? Like you're saying, the feminine. You have to travel through the world. The world is fundamentally the expression of the feminine. And you see her in that world cosmic egg there, reflecting that these four elements that are like binding matter as the form of Saturn in its pure form, time. We've got to travel through the essence of the feminine, and the feminine takes us to judgment, and which you can see if you look at judgment, right? It's definitely not a masculine presence, is it? It's more of a feminine presence once again. And then we look at the child, and the child is neuter. In fact, you could even say that the judgment has got an element of neuter in it, but there's a high feminine degree of potential, especially with the numbers 20. So that's really interesting. Yeah, totally. I hope you're going to have a good day, brother. Did he fall off? Are you there? Did he fall?
Who?
Off of the
Zeralath? Zeralath left.
Zeralath. Yeah.
I think he
must have fallen off.
he bounced.
He did. He said he had to go. But anyway, let me welcome General Shinobi, and I'm almost done with the revelation of the last three powers. But before I jump onto that, I was going to say namaste, welcome, dear brother Shinobi. I'm sure you guys all know it. My cherry on my chillum makes me smile so much. My cherry is what glows on the end of my chillum. I haven't had a chillum in years, by the way. I don't know. It's been like a decade. Big love, big blessings to you, my cherry. I hope you're enjoying your cherries on your chillums or on your spliffs, whichever ones you roll with. Big blessings, peace, honor, love. And as you know, General Shinobi, as I call him, Shinobi One Kenobi, Toby One Kenobi. He brings the spirit of the Star Wars with him, and the Force is strong in General Shinobi. So, as we know, he spends a lot of time decoding words, breaking things down, putting things into perspective, playing with these cosmic riddles of power that are the vibrational field of time and space. It's an honor having you here. I'll just quickly finish the last thought that I had about the the polarities of threes, because this is going to break us back into the Enneagram. I think when we talk about this, it will be useful. So where were we on that breaking of the polarities of three before? We were talking about that's right. 1, 2, 3. Were we at strength, or did we move past strength? I think we moved into the Chariot, the Lovers, and the Hierophant, right? Have I lost my place? It's a problem when you lose your place on this dynamic. It becomes challenging. So we've got the first chapter of 3. Then we've got the second chapter of 3, but actually when you look at it, there's 2 3s within the 3s, because the sun becomes the beginning of a new 3 that ends with the star, but the moon becomes the beginning of a new 3 that ends with there. So when you look at how many groups of 3 you've actually got 21 different groups of 3, which is quite interesting, which takes us to a particularly interesting notion. You know, what do you have when you've got 21 groups of 3? You've got 63, which is 9 cycles of 7, which is working the 7 cycle into 9, which in itself is quite powerful and profound. But we're looking at the foundational 3 cycles. So the foundational cycles of 3 would be the world judgment, the sun, the moon going into Aries, going into Mars, the tower. Then we've got the devil going into the transformation. Then we've got the hanged man, right? And the hanged man goes into justice as a pivot, lands on Jupiter. Then we've got the hermit, strength, which goes to Cancer, to the Chariot, ends on the Chariot. So you can see the relationship between the Chariot being an ending point, right? And the Wheel of Fortune being an ending point. Very important. And so obviously there's a relationship between the hermit and justice. So you can see these very subtle relationships coming out here, because the hermit is, when we start seeking for the justice within ourselves, the hermit is what we're going to discover. We're going to start finding that inner justice, which is the key. Then the next cycle becomes a cycle of the mind's expansion towards power, which is the mercurial lovers, the Gemini element going through the conditioning forces of Taurus to end in the power of the emperor. And the power of the emperor then is brought back to the feminine. And the feminine is the empress that takes us through the wheel of initiation of the high priestess into the power of the magician. And so you can see how the magician is linked with the emperor. You see that in that cycle. And the power of the emperor is what's coming out in its perfected form in the magician. And we can then also see how the ability to move between the worlds, which is the Chariot, is what becomes the power of the emperor that is expressed in the magician. And when we then look at that, we can see how the Wheel of Fortune is that Jupiterian expansion that then becomes the potency that the Chariot will manifest, right? And so we see how these cycles are all linked in cycles of 3, making up essentially 7 fundamental cycles of 3. And those 7 fundamental cycles of 3, there are actually within them 3 hidden cycles. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, I've been rambling on for a long time. What do you guys think? And then to associate this with the external world, those cycles of 3 are going to make a lot more sense when we look at the actual minor arcana. Welcome, dear brother Shinobi.
Hey, what's up?
How are you?
Yeah, doing really well, man. Really good. Yeah, I just I jumped in when I did because I did want to kind of reply to what Zeralat was saying about the Fool card, because I have a take on the Fool card that using etymology, and it looks like there's water in the background. So I don't want to diverge too much from the 3 or the point that you've just been on, but I do just want to say that obviously the Fool could be, the Fool we know, OOL, and also the Full, FULL, being too full, for example, arrogance, or the Fall, as in falling off the cliff, FALL. It can be any of those, but all of those signal to me ignorance or arrogance, because there's water in the background, and that's definitely water, not mountains, and that being ignorance of the field of the waters, of the emotional, and too analytical, too thinking, too like high and mighty. For example, if your cup's too full, you've got no room for any more water. You think you're right, hence why he's about to walk off a cliff and he's not listening to the underdog, the dog at his heels. And I can see that it seems to be that that's the age we're in now, the Fool card, because well, example, arrogance is also arrogance. If you have too much air, if you're too think you're high above others, that's arrogance. And the age we're in now seems to be the Fool card. People seem to be fools because they're either ignorant or they're arrogant. One or the other. Most people are either ignorant or arrogant in the collective psyche. And that with the 0, it can be both everything and nothing. And even the word infinite, it's infinite. It's infinite. So it's both infinite. It's always made me like, I've always been a bit weird by the word infinite, because it's literally infinite. It's telling you that it's not infinite. So it's kind of paradox, the Fool there. But it does seem to signal that's the age we're in now, where people are either ignorant to the field around them, or they're arrogant and they think they know better than the field around them. You know, airheads comes to mind, AI, which is the alchemical symbol of air, like AI, that is air. We're in the age of air, and there are a lot of airheads, a lot of fools for sure. So I just wanted to raise that point. And when you were talking about 3, when I was younger, I still do, but I had a lisp, and I remember my brother trying to teach me how to say 3 when I was 3 years old, and I kept saying free, like with an F instead of a T and a H. And I think that it's kind of helped with etymology and sort of like with wordplay and stuff, having a lisp. And I think people who are dyslexic are quite good at that as well, perhaps. But yeah, 3 seems to signal free and tree spelled T-R-I, which can be spelled T-R-Y, which is try. And what this is signaling to me is that we've always been free. We've always been part of the world tree. But all we need to do is try. But people have kind of given up. There's this kind of air of, oh, nothing matters, basically like oblivion. Oh, the world's going to end anyway. We're always told that the world's going to end 2020, 2012, 2019, 2030. So people have this kind of oblivion in them. They don't want to try. People seem to have stopped trying. But we need to remember that we're a part of the tree. We are the Trinity. We're the child of the mother and the father, the masculine and the feminine, and we have that inside of us. And we're all seeds from the world tree, and inside of us contains everything about everything. Is all inside of us. It's not outside of us. We see things, hear things, and we remember. That's memory. But really it's just triggering what's inside of us already. So I just wanted to say that, because you were talking about the 3, kind of a little bit unrelated because you were talking about the arcana, but I'm just talking about the etymology of the tri, the trinity, and three, and being free as well.
You know, it's a lovely point that you make there about the fool. And this is one of the interesting points, the permeating potential, that polarizing element of the fool. And you can see it when you look at Chinese. That's what sort of brought that up.
Your mic is muted, Franklin.
Yeah. Thank you, Cosmic. How do I do that? I thought I'd unmuted it and then I switched to the screen. So I was going to say, you know, it's a great point that you make there about the arrogance related to the air element. And in Taoism, they associate this quite well. So, like I was saying before, the Taoism consider the element of air to be seen as metal, right? The element of metal, as we can see here. And even it's like a well-known thing that within Taoism, the metal element, when it's out of balance, brings about the potential of arrogance, right? And that arrogance is because metal is really hard. Think about why the Taoists used the element of metal to represent one aspect of air, because it's hard and it's brittle and it will not yield. It's arrogant. I know what's right. This is the fact. This is the truth. Screw all of you. Metal, right? And you're going to put your metal to the test, as we say in common language. This idea is expressing these notions, and so it's got to do with being very highly organized, specifically principled. However, that when it's in a state of balance, it can be quite healthy. But when it's out of balance, it's extremely arrogant. And then we see another element here. The element of wood is the opposite of the element of metal. So wood, instead of being brittle, it represents flexibility. So in its negative element, wood would be controlled, avoiding confrontation even when it's needed. Weakness, right? That would be the negative aspect of out of balance of wood. But wood represents humility. And so you can see this idea of this dichotomy of the element of air representing, and so here in the tarot, this is why we in the tarot major arcana, we would say that here we see the fool in the beginning of the pack. Some tarot packs will put the fool here after the world. So when the fool comes here after the world and sits below the devil in this place here, that is the arrogant fool that causes us to fall, which causes this whole process. That's 2 points within. And when the fool is in the beginning of the pack, that represents the element of wood in its positive element of flexibility in order to permeate all things. So it's like before and after, almost. The before the fool is this folly, and the fool represents the folly that causes you to become addicted or to run through all the worldly things to begin with, instead of just going straight through the spiritual process of this climb in ascent towards a higher state of being. However, the fool does have this dichotomy within it, and that's why we speak in tarot. When the fool comes up, depends on all the surrounding cards, what aspect of the fool you're bringing into the reading. Is it the fool, which is that inspiration that takes you to a high level of transcendence, or is it the fool that's an idiot? It's going to do something really stupid, folly. So that's like a really good point you make there, Shinobi, about that, the negative side of the air element. I mean, every element's got positive and negative sides, right? But that one, that brittle metal iron thing, which is like completely, stuck on the information level of number 4. Number 4 doesn't look good. Let's look at this, for example. Okay, let's go into this. So what do we see for the number 4 in swords? Metal. Okay, so you see number 4 in swords, it means you got to wait. It also represents somebody that's, that's like a burial chamber. He's being buried with his sword. He can't do anything now. Sword is about discrimination, about chopping away the things. There's nothing going to happen now. There's stagnancy. So when it comes to the mental field, that element of stagnancy, that's what gets you stuck. That 4 element does, in a reading, it would mean that, like, depending on the cards around it, it could be positive, meaning that you just got to wait. It's not time now. You got to wait. You will get your time at a later stage, possibly, depending on the other cards. But it can also mean that, like, there's a stagnant energy that can be, detrimental. And so we look at the different numbers going through, like just looking at the element of air, right? The number 2 on the enneagram, when we're looking at the number 2, represents the lunar energy. When the lunar energy is in the air field, it means you're wrestling with a decision. You're wrestling with 2 things: the potential and the polarity and the potential power, but not quite sure what to do. You see the moon up there in the corner between the 2 swords on the right-hand side, and the 2 swords are poised in such a way that they're almost a pair of scissors. Almost looks like he wants to remove his head, right? Isn't that interesting?
It also looks like a V for Venus as well.
Right. Interesting. It does have a sort of a V element there. That's quite interesting. That's a good point. And the V represents 2 mountains as well, right? So we're talking about the Ketaic element there. Ketaic, it's like a vaginal door, right? A V. Most men spend their lives trying to get back into the groove, into that wonderful groove where we find so much peace and joy and fulfillment, and maybe even children. And so you see, the ones are always positive. The ones are always the number 1, the sun. It expresses itself in wondrous ways throughout all of the elemental potentials. But notice here, the number 5. When the number 5, Mercury, in the element of air, it can be overactive. And the overactive element of air of Mercury in 5 can produce doubt, and worry. That can weaken your spleen from a Chinese medicine perspective. And the number 6, when seen in the sphere of air, of swords, represents going off. You need to move away. It means you're finally taking that journey. But it's not a very particularly fun thing. It's something that needs to be done. And it often represents leaving something behind you didn't want to leave behind. So there's a positive aspect when the number 6 touches the element of air, but it comes with a sort of melancholy. Number 7, you can see the 7 is a challenge. When air is going inwards, it's question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. It rattles itself up. It gets overwhelmed. It's got too much on its plate. It's challenged. So that element, you see a problem here. Number 8, well, Saturn in the field of air, you're stuck, right? It pins you down, man, because air is supposed to be like it's got to do with the field of planning and organizing. Too much of that airiness, too much of those swords can get you stuck. That's the stuckness we were talking about earlier, right? As it relates to the number 4. Number 9, Mars in the field of air, detrimental. Look at that. In Afrikaans we say teleurgestel. That's like gnashing of teeth and cringing and very sad and very unhappy. Such a sense of loss, and all of the mind is just running over and over and over. That card could also have relation to do with not being able to sleep, for example, sleeping issues. Number 10, gosh, look at what number 10 does. 10 is the recapitulation, the new cycle of the number. 10 doesn't look good. 10 is like ruin. Things have gone like really badly, and it's just the thing, you don't have to explain it, right? Look at it. So I don't have to explain number 10 here. But if you look at it, for example, look at the element of water. Look at what 10 represents. 10 represents satiety, represents like the fulfillment, that final fulfillment that you seek. 9 represents, wow, it's a really wonderful journey. Things are like it's not the full fulfillment forever, but things are good. Things are really good now, right? You notice Saturn in the element of 8 isn't really bad. It's a quite an emotional journey, but you can see that there's some powerful benefits here. Like what has been won, hasn't been lost, and the passion is driving you on a journey which is going to take you to a proper positive place, right? So it's not bad. But look at what happens in the sphere of water when we're looking at the sphere of 7. Gosh, 7 gets nasty. 7 gets ugly. That's like delusion. You're looking into, looking for phantoms, looking for things. Jealous people might be suffering this kind of element, right? When like, I know she's having an affair. She must be having an affair. Oh, she might, the mind playing tricks on you and going crazy when obviously the woman's not having an affair. I mean, I've been through that with a woman, like convinced that I'm like got another woman when I didn't have one. And it's a nightmare. It just doesn't stop. Number 6, I see 6 is beautiful. Like there's the heavy power of the nostalgia coming through on the 6, and it's showing like a really positive element of being able to give and receive. The giving is the act of receiving. Notice you're giving there, but look at what you've got. You've got abundance, emotional abundance, the ability to give of yourself endlessly and gaining more. You see number 2 here. 2 is beautiful in the sphere of cups. That's like relationships. You're in love. There's somebody, you're seeing the best of somebody else, and you're seeing a reflection of yourself, and you're seeing that beautiful side of yourself, and it's wonderful. You see the power of the sun, the caduceus mercurial transmutation with the sun, the red dragon above it. That's bringing out the best, the highest potentials. You see the 3 in cups is like, this is the celebration. This is moving forward. The 4 in cups, it's not quite as bad as the 4 of swords, is it? But you're still not quite fulfilled. However, it's good. Emotions work well with being settled because the element of water doesn't want to move too much. It wants to settle. But it just means it's like there's a work to be done. You've got your 3 cups. They're sitting there waiting. The 4th cup you're waiting for, there's a certain amount of contemplation, a certain amount of meditation necessary to get to the point. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe you're not ready to embrace that. Obviously, the 5 of cups gets a bit nasty. Compare the 5 of cups to the 5 of swords, right? Just to look at this. So the 5 of swords is got to do with mental. It's got to do with doubt. It's got to do with like worrying, being stuck in that pattern, right? The 5 of cups is where you're looking at the things in the past and how they have sort of, they haven't brought you the joy that you wanted to bring. You're looking at the half. He's looking at the cups that's fall over and over. Behind him, there's 2 perfectly good cups standing up. He's not looking at those. He's looking at the cups that fell over. He's not picking himself up and going forward and going, hey, I've still got 2 cups. I'm good to go. Look at those other cups. So that's like the Cancerian in a negatively aspected space, like that emotional looking back towards the past, which is not necessarily healthy. However, when we put it into the context of the wands, now it's a challenge, right? You're literally at war with yourself. But notice how the number 4 works so beautifully in the element of fire, because fire breathes life into the stagnancy of 4 and gives 4 that perfect synergetic double polarity of this is a card for marriage. This is a card for union, a union of 2 unions that are going to go well. But it can often be related to business relationships or, your career, your vocation, your life path, finding something that's a synergetic. Synergy is very much powerfully reflected here. Notice how the number 7 was like looking nasty in the element of water. Let's just go to element of water quickly. And just to get a, so look how nasty number 7 was looking, right? Like, yeah, it's just not looking very good at all. This delusion and lost your way and completely out of your element. But look at how 7 here. Okay, you got a lot of challenges, but you're rising to the occasion and you're kicking ass. You're getting on with the work. You are going to overcome your challenges. Those ones that are trying to knock you down, they're down there, you're up here. There's a reason for that. And you are armed and you are ready and you're facing the situation. Number 6, look at how beautiful 6 is. Six in the element of fire is so wonderfully expressed. You can see 6 is working pretty well here with the element of water. So that shows us about the nature of the 6 element, the 6 energy, the Venus energy, the energy of Tiferet, for example, that 6th sphere bringing these elements. But look what happens when we put it into the sphere of air. Where's air? There we go. There's air. So when we put into the sphere of air, it's that challenging journey to leave something behind. That's not so easy, right? And so you can see literally, and look at the number 8 here, the 8 being stuck. But look at the number 8 here in the element of fire. Those 8 wands, there's a lot of work. You're very busy. This does relate to Saturn in its powerful form of career and vocation. Saturn loves to be there. It means you're going to be busy. If you've got a business and you see that number 8, it means you're going to be nailing it. You're going to be busy. It's going to be a lot of work. There's a lot to do. Look at all those staves. They've got like new shoots on them. They're going to produce the goods. It's going to take you to a level of success. Number 9 here is a good one. You've reached a good level. You're putting all your ducks in a line. You've worked hard to get to where you're at. You're making sure that you're keeping your crops. Look at all the growth. Even number 10. Number 10 means like you're going to be a bit overwhelmed, but you're going to get through it. So you see how these numbers relate and dance between different elements. And so these are that sort of sephirotic relationships between the macrocosm and the subtle forces in the expressing in the macrocosmic reality, which are how we are going to rise to the occasion. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, totally. So like, the numbers kind of correspond, like the 8 and the different, I never actually kind of thought about like the connections between the, I guess I never thought about the minor arcana, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's like we've been driven away from them, but that's like the forces. Those are and those forces of the major arcana are what drive the process of this, right? And we forget that it's the world that's pushing us to change, right? So we don't realize that. For example, let's look at the sphere of career. Okay, this is your sphere of your vocation, your life path, what you're doing. This is how you manifest yourself. Men are very related to this element. We define ourselves as a man based upon this stuff, how successful we are, what we can get done. Women don't tend to. Women tend to relate more to this element. They value themselves on their emotional senses and their emotional level of attunement, more so their sensitivity and their ability to carry, because this has got to do with motherhood. It's got to do with carrying. See, the relationship's very important. Relationships define a woman. A woman defines herself based upon her relationship more than her career. Men, the relationship is secondary and men also define themselves more with swords, right? We relate ourselves more to the decisions that we've made and to the challenges that we've overcome. Just swords has got there's a lot of stuff going on here that's not looking very pretty. It's like it's a heavy metal, it's a heavy element, right? When we look at the element of earth, this is so much more in tune with the divine feminine. Look at it. Isn't it beautiful? Wow. The only problem there is the number 5, right? You don't really want to see the number 5 because it relates to like financial trouble. You don't want to see that. Number 4 is good. Number 10 is like you've nailed it. Number 9 is this money coming. You can see it there. Look at all the coins falling out of there and it's happy and there's abundance and the thing. Number 10 is like you've nailed it. You've built an empire. Number 8, there's Saturn in its beautiful place. 8 is working hard and achieving success. He's building all of his things to get to 9. Even 7 is like the internalized principles. So women are far more better at navigating the challenges in the world than men are, because men get stuck with their mental nonsense. That's why you'll probably find that men more often than not suffer mental illnesses than women. Isn't that interesting? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And some of the things that the Fae have been kind of talking to me about in terms of like, you know, the self and like, so the idea is that the self is kind of like basically siphoned off into sort of like 4 sort of Zerfaxes, if you will. So you got the main Zerfax, the kid Zerfax, that's basically your 5 sensory experience. But then you have the masculine Zith and the feminine O. And from the Fae's perspective, if you're a man, your will is in the Zith, the imagination, the intellect, and your O, that's the part where God or the divine feminine speaks to you through your intuition. And if you're a woman, your will is in the O, the gate part, the emotion, the intuition, the sort of the infinity, and then Zith, the male part, becomes your sort of counteracting force. So in Zarfexology and this Fae magic thing, it's all about the male and female polarities are kind of like a very important aspect to this. But I think it kind of goes what you're talking about how, and I think in too, like how we define the self, because I realize that in Western culture in general, we tend to, I shouldn't say we, I say Western culture tends to identify with the intellect in the sense that it sees the intellect and the logos as sort of the nexus of the soul and consciousness. Whereas what I've been kind of realizing that consciousness is more kind of like ambient, you know, through the body, you know, if you will. So, and that is kind of where the feminine basically manifests itself. So what you're talking about here is like this dynamics sort of in action. And that's kind of their perspective, is that basically if you're a man, you should worship the goddess. And if you're a woman, you should worship the male god, because it's that opposite gender, opposite sex in terms of the understanding of oneself is sort of where one learns real wisdom, by sort of embracing and engaging with the opposite of themselves, engaging with the other. And that by sort of engaging with the other, you sort of discover yourself in that contrast.
Real men always worship at the cup of their ladies.
I've got an image to share in regards to the hero's journey, which in its concept is interesting, because when I think of hero, I think of Cairo and the chi and the ro, like the movement of energy. You know, because anyone to me that moves energy, like healers or you know, like people that move energy, for me, they're heroes. People that see something you know, bad that's going on and do something about it, they're heroes. There's heroes, you know, heroes have been kind of made into movies, and they wear pants on the outside, like you have Batman, Superman, stuff like that. But there are like everyday heroes, people who move energy, the Chi-Ro. And of course in Cairo as well, the initiations, when they used to initiate young people. So this I just want to show you my stack of paper. Like, these are all of my notes here. Like some of them, it took me like 15 minutes to look through them all to find this. And this is something I made a while ago. I'm not sure if everyone can see it, but basically this is the hero's journey. So the way I see our journey is, when we're born with one soul, one part of our soul, that is. And when we're 7, we get our second soul. So with the first soul we're born with, we just have one soul. We can't really perceive others. We can't recognize other souls. But when we get our second soul, when we're 7 years old, we can recognize the soul in others. And then when we're 14, we get our third soul. And then when you get your third soul, you're able to create a new soul. You're able to create new life at age 14, which is when kids should be initiated. And when we're 21, so another 7 years, that's when we cross the threshold. So sorry, when we're 14, so when we get a third soul, that's when they start pushing fear on children and teenagers, when we should be initiated, we should be expanding, but instead they retreat. They try to squash our third soul that we've just got. Don't have kids. So much fear. They're trying to squash us in. So that fear there is the refusal of the call. People don't want to create new life. They don't want to step into the innermost cave. And then this is when we should get a mentor and receive wisdom from others, which is lacking in this day and age. The elders of the village, the shaman. So when we're 21, that's when we get our fourth soul, which is tapping into the force all around us. We've just created new life, age 14. We have the ability to create new life, that is. But at age 21, that's when we start tapping into the force that is all around us. That's the fourth soul. And this is when we cross the threshold. And then we see what is reality, who are we, where are we? And then as we go further into the cave, we start looking at what's right and what's wrong with like religions, for example, what to believe. And then as we go further, you start gaining gnosis. So after you've gained the knowledge, you start applying it with intuition, then you get the gnosis and seeing what is real, what reality is, what's real about us, what's our realness, and how do we fit into the world. And then the next part would be like change can be hard, like applying what we've learned by stepping into the inner cave. Example, people being called a conspiracy theorist for thinking outside the box, of going into the box and shining a light outwards, expansion. People get gaslit and told to get back in your box. And the next one, I've actually got it here, it's probably easier reading from this, is the potential connection to higher self, openness, light and less dense, more energy, more energy. And then the final step there of the hero's journey would be to take it back to the physical world and manifest it. Your guide is within you. So I drew this about 3 or 4 years ago, so it's a bit messy, and because of this topic I tried finding it, so I thought it was quite relevant. So the whole point in the hero's journey is going into the innermost cave to bring spirit into matter, to go inwards, which should be an initiation, which should be a journey. And I've mapped out like an eye here, because that is really the bridge crossing the threshold. Is an inward journey to find the to find who we are and where our place is in the world.
I have a question about your diagram, Toby. In regards to the second and or third or fourth souls, do you associate those souls with the third eye? Just curious, because I'm noticing a similar pattern with your thing and my system. There seems to be a really interesting overlap that's happening here, right? Because you talk about the idea of 4 souls, right? And in Zarfaxology, the idea is that you have 4 kid Zarfaxes, 4 bodies that then form together to make the nexus of the self from those 4 things. So it's interesting that number 4 is relevant here. And it also seems to line up with the fact, like what you're talking about in terms of souls. In my system, I think of it as Zerfax bubbles. So for example, you start off with, just starting up with the first soul, and that by you said that the second soul essentially recognizes like empathy, other people, caring about people, right? And this lines up with my system because it's like, if you realize that you're a Zerfax, you just think of yourself as one universe. But if I recognize a Zerfax outside of me, I recognize that this is another person with their own feelings and their own intuition. So that lines up with that aspect too. And so the idea is in Zerfaxology, so you have one node of perception that you kind of start off with as like an animal creature, and that's your kid Zerfax node, right? And then you get the second node, which is your imagination, your third eye, et cetera, et cetera. Then the third node relates to your emotional state, your feelings. And then the fourth node basically represents how your soul is kind of interconnected with the world soul. It's kind of like the connector port that connects you to the thing. And so, and you can actually I actually have a way for you to kind of perceive this, visualize. So I want you to kind of think of what you're seeing around you right now in this room and imagine it being encased in a sphere, like a snow globe, right? And then try to visualize something in your mind's eye, something out. Like, how about something simple like a red triangle or like that? And imagine it being to the left of you and existing in a different sphere outside of that. And then you think about, what emotion am I feeling right now? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling anxious? And then what you do is you figure out what color you associate that emotion with, and then make a sphere of that to your right. And that's going to be what your gate node is. So the color of that sphere emotionally then sort of has an effect on what happens in your imaginal sphere, and what happens in your imaginal sphere then comes to your main sphere. And then you can think of the external world as sort of like a fourth sphere that exists behind you. And I find that by sort of like actually visualizing this, like this is something you can try yourself. You can actually start to learn to perceive Zerfaxes. It's not just something that it's not just a conceptual kind of like idea or placeholder. There's a way to kind of actually perceive them fourth dimensionally. I don't know. I kind of went off on a tangent, and I'm sorry that I basically talked about my system and talking about, your system. I don't want to like overshadow you, man, but I'm just kind of pointing out because I'm realizing there's some really interesting intersections here between what you're doing and what I'm doing.
No, that's really cool, Cosmic. And thanks for sharing that. I think a couple of times that we've shared some stuff which both align, and it's not my system, or your system or anyone's system. It is the system, which is the Psi stem, PSY, which is the stem of the tree, which is the world tree, which is the world soul. We're just branching, we're just reaching out to different branches, but it all comes from the same tree. So it is the system. The system is the Psi stem, which relates to the all mind or all spirit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah. So like the thing is, what's cool about like what you do and I do and Indy and Franklin does is there's and other people as well, is that there's different ways we tap into the all mind as we branch out, but then what we bring into matter from spirit will look different from other people. But it's the same language, although it's a different language or a different symbol, but it's the same frequency. It's the same message is what I mean. Like Indy, for example, we've been talking about like books. So you're a writer as well, Cosmic. But it's funny because the stuff Indy's coming up with is very similar to my story that I don't know whether it's channeled or whatever. It's interesting how that lots of us seem to pick up on the same kind of what's the word, message is a good way to put it, I guess. It goes beyond symbols, beyond language. It's a frequency. So you get yours via the Fae, it's happening to them, but they're of course a part of the one spirit, I believe. I get my stuff from don't really know, to be honest with you. When I kind of have conversations with myself, I call it doing Tai Chi for the psyche. So I get loads of different threads of different information, like play around with the words and the language, try and get to the essence of it. But it's kind of like a rinse and repeat. It's like a little dance like this, but I have to do it in my mind. Yeah, I say my mind, like the mind. This is just a tuner. This is we can tap into the frequency which is all around us, but you've got to exercise your mind or your brain to pick up on the signals. And I think that the stars, constellations are frequencies. They're in sea and they're lights. If you have a light in water, if you have a frequency in water, it makes light, like their frequencies. And I think that we can pick up onto them. And I don't know whether they're in the firmament, out of the firmament. The firmament's just a barrier, and any barriers we can dissolve with our imagination. We can go outside of our minds. We can go out of our minds, and then you get called crazy or weird. But to be weird is just to cast your own fate. So yeah, it's cool that we're kind of reaching into the same stuff. Like, I've got so much stuff in all these papers, but I'm the most disorganized person. And I do actually want to try and organize some of this stuff and share things.
I know
like
exactly what you mean, Toby. I have probably over a couple hundred pages of notes in regards to Zarfexology. And I had to slow down because I was like, wait a minute, does this stuff make sense? I had to I had to slow down how much of the stuff I was channeling just to make sure it all made sense and it worked. And it's weird because like oftentimes it's interesting how I just started with the alphabet. Like that's all I channeled. And then this whole system, I basically kind of just teased out of it. Like imagine you take an origami like paper, you fold it up, and then you kind of unfold it back again into its original shape. It's kind of like that. Like that's how I describe it. Like it's just this thing that you're kind of unraveling. It just keeps going and it doesn't stop. This whole thing is fun, what we're doing.
But yeah, I do think it's interesting that obviously we have Cairo, where the Great Pyramid is located, which is pronounced Hiero or Hero. And then we have the cross with the X and the P in the center, which is the Chi-Rho or the Chi-Rho. Everything is all pointing to that the hero is actually inside all of us. But what's happened is that the church has externalized our power and said there's one hero and he died for your sins and you've just got to wait for him to come back. So everyone's just sitting around, drinking, watching TV, waiting. But really the hero is all of us. And we all have to take this hero's journey, the innermost cave, dark night of the soul, or whatever. And unfortunately, lots of people have to do it on their own. They have to self-initiate, which makes it a lot harder because then you don't know what's real, what's true. If you have teachers or somebody to guide you, it's a little easier for sure, I can imagine. But I think that what Franklin mentioned earlier, that when there's this kind of darkness in the world, the age we're in now, more and more people are having to start to compensate and actually like step up a little bit, because I think for so long we've been lazy. Our lives are easy, especially in the West. With the majority of people, in some ways, I mean, just daily living, drinking water, food, electricity, stuff like that. We don't really have to struggle. It's kind of easy, so we don't have to do much. We don't have to use our minds. I think that's what it is. We don't have to use our minds, so we can't pick up on the frequencies because we haven't trained our brains. People not exercising and gaining weight and stuff, that's just the physical, but also there's a spiritual aspect of exercising and moving, and in turn being moved to do change. That's what the chi ro is. The chi is the energy, is the ka, the vital essence, the life force, the etheric body, and the ro is the movement, moving that energy. So yeah, I think that's just what I wanted to bring to the table in regards to the hero's journey. So I don't really know much about the tarot as such.
Cool. Thank you for that. That was awesome. I wanted to present a slide with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey diagram. I have it in the share screen section, and it is muted. So I don't know if Franklin is still with us, but I would like to have that slide up when that comes around. But in the meantime, I can begin to discuss what's being featured here. Oh, here we go.
Where's the image? Oh, you got it there. Cool.
It's there. Cool. All right. So it goes counterclockwise, which is unusual. I was not expecting that, but it is very interesting how he breaks it down into the 17 stages. And he calls it the monomyth, which basically like kind of suggests that this is like the common themes of all the myth and the mythos of the world that we find in the stories that we see through myths and legends. So it begins with the call to adventure, and then followed by the refusal to the call. So I see that like General Shinobi's diagram is like pretty much laid some foundation that's like parallels to this. And so in this part where the call to adventure comes, there's a mixed element of excitement and like anxiety and apprehension. So like everybody wants to go on an adventure, but then once people start to realize like, am I prepared for this adventure? Am I going to be able to like make it back from this adventure? Then they start to question things. And that's like the benefits of anxiety and the benefits of questioning things that comes into play, which a lot of people downplay the benefits of nervousness, but it is really a guide that helps us prepare. And it's a challenging one because it's not a fun process. It puts us in a tense place, but that kind of thing is like a driving force where like without that being in that tenseness, it wouldn't be a factor that allows us to have the impetus to drive us away from that by using preparation. And I feel like when you have some form of anxiety arise or fear, it's trying to push you towards preparation. So, and precaution. So like if you're not ready now, it's going to mean that you're going to have to like bolster up like a whole training regiment where you're going to become prepared, but it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of push to get yourself there. You're going to have like a constant reminder. It's like, okay, I'm still nervous. I need to overcome this. I'm going to keep going till I get over this. And so that's kind of like the driving force. So then we have the supernatural aid, the step number 3, the third stage. And so maybe some people would interpret that as like there's a sign or omen, like I need to go on this journey. Or maybe you have a vision like, okay, I've seen that like this is what I need to be doing. It's been shown to me. And that could be like the higher self that's like showing the individual that's like it's time to like really bolster up and like take a step. You can only like prepare for so long and like imagine what's going to happen, but by the time you've finally like started to begin this journey, you're going to start to realize like what's really going to entail and like how it's going to really play out beyond what your imagination is telling you. So then we have in the fourth stage the crossing of the threshold. So at this point you might be like going out and you've lost like the comfort of your home and security of like your family and your friends. You've crossed the threshold into this journey that you're going on to become a hero. And at this point, you don't know that you're going to become a hero, but you're being called out to like step out of the familiar, and you've now come into the unfamiliar. And so you're starting to realize that like, okay, this is becoming like different. And I don't know what's going on right now. So then after you've crossed the threshold, you end up in the belly of the whale. So at this point, like you're swallowed into this whole new world, and you're like, oh no, like I don't know if I can cope here. So you kind of like have second thoughts. It's like maybe I should turn back, but you're stuck now. You can't get out of the belly of the whale. So at this point, you're gonna have to make do, and you're gonna have to figure out your way out of this. And you've chosen to make this journey, and now you've got yourself into a pickle. So you're gonna have to work it out. At this point, you go through a road of trials. So you don't learn to do things better until you've made a mistake. Sometimes you can watch the mistakes of others and you can learn from them, which is like the most wise. But not everybody gets that opportunity. And even then, once you start to do the things that you thought you have learned, you're going to find that it's harder to actually implement than it might have been in your imagination. It's like, oh, I saw somebody else make this mistake and I knew not to do that, but now I'm seeing other things happen. So then that's like the whole road of trials. Then you're going to come into the next stage, which is the 7th stage, meeting with a goddess. So there's going to be some allure that's drawing you into this journey now. You're like, okay, even though I've been so preoccupied with like the challenges at hand and the steps that I have to take and all the training and all the learning that I have to do, there's going to be a payoff to this. Like once I've become able to be on my own and I can do things with confidence and have that self-efficacy, be able to work through this stuff after my lessons I've gone through and the roads of trials that I've been able to rise above, I'm going to be able to get some kind of a reward out of this. Sometimes that reward could be like gold or some kind of financial reward. Sometimes it could be, you know, like you'll meet some goddess and you'll run off with her. You know, it could be all kinds of different things. So then you have, after you meet this goddess, that the woman is a temptress. So then you start to realize that, like, okay, maybe sometimes like what initially seems like a huge reward could be like a con, or maybe it was just like a fluke. Like it seemed like she was interested in me, but she was just really trying to get close so she could steal my money for my journey, or like steal the map that I had and like steal off my journey and like go to find the treasures that I was seeking. So you never know what it's going to be. You got to be careful sometimes where things seem really good sometimes, and then you'll find out that maybe it was just, you know, something sneaky coming up on you and you didn't even realize what was happening. So then after this, we have the 9th stage of the journey, atonement with the Father. So I think at this point, we're so far away from home. You know, this is like in the middle of the journey. You've already come down to like the bottom of the circle here, and you're atoning with the Father. So at this point, you're starting to realize that even though my father per se might not be exactly with me here now, but like you're starting to gain in the Father's eyes, like he's proud of you for like having come through this, and as many things as you've gone through, still continuing on to like not be daunted by all the challenges that you've come through. And then you've become atoned from any like shame that you might have had for like being a coward or something like that. And now you're proud of yourself for like being able to have the wherewithal to be able to like persist in this challenging journey. Then you have apotheosis, which I believe would refer to as like the idea of falling away from worshiping a father, and now you're starting to realize that like you need to become that father. You can't always have like the leader above you like do everything for you and like pray for them to fix everything for you. You're gonna have to step it up and stop having to like ask for help all the time and start doing things on your own. Then we have the ultimate boon. So this is like the ultimate inspiration, where something's gonna happen that's gonna draw you to like feel like in your heart, like, okay, this is my calling. This is like what I need to do with my life. This is my purpose now. So now you feel like it fulfilled and like inspired, and you're like, you're ready to do this. And you have passion. So then after this point, we have the refusal of the return. So I feel like maybe this is the idea that like maybe you were gonna do this to be able to go home and get all the glory from everybody that you love and know. But maybe you're thinking now, like, I might not return now. I might just stay here because it's so tempting. I've got like all these new friends. I've got like new trainers and then now I'm a trainer and I've got new pupils. Like all this stuff is drawing you away from like going back to everything. And if anybody's read the book The Alchemist, they find that the true treasure is right where you left home, but you had to take that journey to realize what that treasure was. And so a lot of people don't realize this, but the ability to return home after like a challenging journey is like it really completes the whole journey. And most people think it's like, oh, that's just the end of the trip. No, this is like fulfillment of the trip when you return. So when you refuse to return, that can be like a challenge in itself. Then we have the magic flight, which could be like, riding on the magic carpet. It could be you got to go on to like learn how to like take a stallion and tame a stallion and like take it for a ride. Could be like all kinds of wild things. Like you're gonna go on a real like adventurous journey here in itself where you're like you're having magical things happen. And like although flight could be like running from something, I think in this term it was referring to like you're flying. You're now flying. Like you've got your passions inside of your heart, and now like you've grown wings and you're flying and you're above it all right now, and you only see one thing in sight. Is like you're ready to achieve your goal and nothing's gonna stop you. So then after this we have the rescue from without. So even though you thought you knew about everything that was going on and like what could help you and what's going to hinder you, like something is going to shock you and surprise you in a good way, and it's going to come in and save the day. Like somebody you didn't even expect to be nearby or on your side is going to come in and become your ally, or some um, door is going to open up. You'll be able to like step out away from what you thought was like the total end and your demise, and this door is going to allow you to come into a place of safety where you can like regather and you can come back and face your challenge with new vigor. So then after this we have you're coming from on this line from separation on the left to the return on the right. After you've gone through these stages of initiation, you're crossing the return threshold. So at this point you've like basically you've gotten through to your challenge, and you've almost lost the battle, and then you've come back to regather, and you're able to like now vision the total conquest and the success of your journey. And then you become the master of the two worlds, and you start to realize that you've become the master of the world that was beyond your home, and now you're going to go back to your home and become a master at your home. And before you were just kind of a novice, you're a beginner, you were kind of scared to step it up. Now you've stepped it up. You can come back to your home and you have stories to tell, and you have like a new confidence about you for having achieved this challenging journey. Then you have the freedom to live, which is like the second to final stage, and you can live on your own now. You don't have to live under other people who have to care for you. You can provide for others, and you've become independent, but you're also like interdependent. You can come back and be one with your people and start to provide to them and reciprocate what they had given you all this time and start to give back. And then finally, the last stage, equilibrium and stability, where you're going to be able to now be at peace. You can hold your own. You can be able to receive. You can give. You've got it all going on, and then the journey can start again. And so this is a diagram that was based on The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it was part 1, The Adventure of the Hero. So this is just a small part of Joseph Campbell's vision of the hero's journey, and he really goes in so deep on these hero's journey diagrams and insights from so many different cultures. He's gathered so much information and wisdom from a lot of different ethnicities and myths and legends and cultures around the world. He's got so many different aspects to this journey, what it can entail and what it encompass. But he really does a great job. If you ever get a chance to watch one of his videos or read one of his books, it can really bring a lot of understanding and insight and wisdom to you. So if you're interested in this, I'd suggest you check it out. Now, a lot of times these heroes' journeys can be there can be a stage where you encounter like a serpent or a dragon or like a snake, like maybe like a viper. And that's usually like part of the journey where things are going to come up and a rattlesnake's going to surprise you, or you're going to have to battle a dragon to survive. And so in a lot of ways, the wandering serpent is usually a part of the hero's journey. And sometimes that can be figurative. So like, the serpent, it does represent one's wisdom, but it also represents protection. And so the fact is that like a small snake, viper or rattlesnake, can protect itself because it has that venom, and just by letting itself be known, um, it can invoke fear. And if a small serpent can do that, imagine what somebody that's as big as us could do with using that kind of energy. So by kind of embodying the energy of the serpent, one can then it can instill a great confidence in an individual and allow them to overcome just about anything, because they've captured that aspect of the venomous nature, so that people realize that they've got something to be feared here. And oftentimes that's like their know-how, whether that's like with a sword or a bolo, or like with some kind of like enchantment or magic, or with their sheer like keenness or like deep understanding of things. So there can be many different forms of it all, but um, something that you can have that can make others um, be like kind of quivering in fear could be a lot of different things, or a combination of things. But part of this is like you go from having been that victim yourself, or like you're in fear, to a place where you can protect yourself from people and put them into that fear that you used to have. So it's a big cycle where it starts to make more sense when you've been there. You were the person that at one point was scared, and now you understand where they're at, when you can instill that fear in them and use that to escape, or use that to overpower whatever like raiders tried to come in and get you, or whatever the situation would have been. But this kind of thing usually like applies to like a storyline of like a allegory referring to like a hero, but it also refers to like everyone's life, like in subtle ways. Like this is like the kind of thing we all go through when we undertake some kind of challenge or transition in our lives. This kind of outlines like what are the feelings and challenges that we're going through. And so it could be anything, like going to a new school, moving to a new town, starting a new job, starting a relationship, just about anything. So there's a
Here's
lot
a
of this stuff.
wild one. What about serpents being related to the waves and quantum physics?
Yeah, I like that too. The serpents are like a gyrating creature. They don't have legs or appendages, so like they just use the vibrations, and the slithering of like the curves is like their whole way to propagate their own movement. And so it's definitely like a parabola kind of a thing. And the curve of the snake is a lot like the curve of electromagnetic frequencies. And so when we have like two of those magnetic frequencies that are are gyrating at the same pulse, then it creates like positive interference, and so they both like increase their wave function. And then we have ones that are in dissonance with each other, and they're not really aligned. That can kind of like weaken their um, their gyration, and that will actually create negative interference. So it's kind of like if you're challenging somebody that's like of the same learning as you and has the same skills, like you're going to learn to step it up for each other, because you've seen other people that were like in that line of whatever technique you're in that have inspired you, and you're like kind of emulating from them. Like, I can do better than I've done before, and I just needed somebody to push me. But when you're facing somebody that has different skills, you don't know what to do. You don't know where to go. You're gonna have to learn. You have to find a teacher. That creates negative interference. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting with the snake because light waves are called sinusoidal light waves. So light waves have the word sin in them. So dying for our sins, the sin is the light. Dying for our knowledge. It's like in the story of Adam and Eve and the snake. Take the fruit of taking the fruit from the tree of good and evil. That's knowledge. That's the knowing. Really, and it was a snake that initiated that. It was the light, the sinusoidal light wave. Also the star, I've worked out what the empty space is on this after Indy's been talking. So I drew this a few years ago, and I found this is 17 stages, but there's quite a few that have 12 steps, but I've left the 13th step blank because I think that it's more of a spiral, this journey. It's not a closed circle, it's a spiral. And that's why I've left the 13 one blank, because when you find what you need at the time to take it back to the physical and manifest, and taking your guide with you, you can go anywhere on the hero's journey. So you don't necessarily need to go back to the learning, the play, the openness, the first stage, or the ordinary world. You can go back to wisdom from others, the mentor, and you can become the mentor. So, or you can, take the call to adventure, or you can go back to the innermost cave as you come out. You can go back. It's a spiral. It's not a closed loop. So maybe that's why I intuitively left the 13th blank step, because even with AA they have 12 steps, but apparently there's a 13th secret step, which is I think it's B1 or B9, might be B1. It's to do with repairing your blood-brain barrier, because after years of substance abuse, it weakens your blood-brain barrier. So you need to repair that after you've repaired everything else. You need to repair your mind. So the 13th step is the kind of secret step. So maybe I've left it blank because of that, because it seems that it's not a circle, it's a spiral. And I think we all know it's a spiral, because when we go through a journey of learning, we always go back to bits we thought we knew, and we find deeper truths, and we emerge from the cave again to the light, to the cave. I think on the Enneagram, I'm not sure where Franklin's gone, but it's the 1 and the 9. The 9, the action is to go into the dark, and then you come out with the 1. The 9 goes into the dark, and you come out with the 1, the light. It's to do with this light and dark, the in and out, the spiral, this kind of fractal kind of energy sort of thing. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Indy.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your diagram. I actually put down a little version of it here in my notes. But I know that sino or sinew can refer to the left, and I think dextral is right. So when they talk about writing from left to right, it's called sinodextral writing, and I think when it's just from right to left, they just call it dextral.
Well, what's interesting about that is sinusoidal or sino. We have our sinuses, which is to do with our nose, and then with this sinusoidal, however it's pronounced, the sinusoidal, sine waves. It's about knowing, right? Who knows? Sinuses, and it's to do with our air, our breath, which it's to do with our nervous system as well, and probably the expansion of light. But yeah, the sinuses and sinusoidal light waves. But with the breath, you can feel lighter. Why is it called our sinuses? I don't know. Maybe there's a link there. Who knows?
Yeah, actually, if you're left-handed, it's called sinistral, and if you're right-handed, it's called dextral. So it's interesting that sin and sinistral and sino and sinu are
There's
associated
an
with
issue with the audio.
sin. Oh,
Only on your end, Franklin, I think.
yeah, I hear echo when you talk.
No. I realized what it was.
Okay.
I realized what it was. It was my phone that was on. It was very, very soft because I was listening on my phone when I was going in the house to check on my boy and everything.
Gotcha.
No, it's all good. Please carry on.
Yeah, but I think that's fascinating because the left hand path is associated with like sin and like black magic and my will be done, and the right hand path is associated with like oneness and mutual benefit and like benevolence and compassion. So
Sorry, Indy, you said the sinuses was the left hand? What was the name for the right?
dextral. Yeah. Sinistral and dextral. Cool words.
Yeah, man, you guys bring some beautiful things to the table, and it's interesting, you know, when you look at it in this phase, like what you were talking about with the four bodies before, when you were saying your 12-step path. I believe it was it was broken into 12 divisions. Am I right?
With mine, it was 13. The hero's journey can be 12 steps, but I think it's good to have a blank which can go back to any. So it's a spiral rather than
No.
loop.
That's what I mean. There were 12 steps that takes it to the 13th, which is that makes perfect sense. In the same way that there's 21 steps, it takes you to the 22. You know, of the major arcana, it's the same idea. So from the mystical perspective, you'd say 12. From the actualized perspective, you'd say 13, because like you say, it's an octave. It's got 7 notes, but it's actually 8 because it begins where it ends and it transcends, which is what the enneagram represents, which is what all of these spinning things represent, whichever number you break it down into, whether it's 7 or 5 or 9 or 12, you know, breaking it into 13. 9 becomes 10. That's why the major arcana have got 10. The minor arcana have got 10. But it's interesting, you know, what you're saying breaks down perfectly, because the Mazloth, or the external manifestation of the universe, is seen as the 12 spheres, right? And the 12 spheres when they're spinning becomes 13 in terms of the equivalent of octave. Maybe it's not the word octave, but you know what I mean. To fulfill a cycle.
Is Sophia the 13th Aeon?
Well, actually, she's actually the first. She's actually the mother of Yaldabaoth. So she's actually the precursor, but she's also the 13th. Does that make sense? So she is the whole story, really, like the whole story, the beginning, the during, and the end, sort of like representing what the fool represents in a sense to the arcana. And it's interesting, like the 4 stages you're talking about in when you're talking about it in terms of when you're talking about it in terms of the Tarot, for example. Let's find where they've got it. Let's find where they got it. Here we go. So here you can see there's the enneagram that does its cycle, and 10 becomes the fulfillment of the ace, right? So there's the 9 steps, the 9 points of movement, where the 10 is sort of the 1 becoming its next octave. But then you'll see there's the Page of Swords, there's the Knight of Swords, there's the Queen of Swords, and the King of Swords, and these represent those 4 bodies. Yeah, 4 souls, 4 states of being, 4 aspects, and it's interesting how those 4 aspects, and this is going to be of interest to you, Indy. You see, you're looking at the manifestation side of it, how it manifests in the world through the 12 becoming the 13, right? That's like the external cosmic, macrocosmic way of putting it into perspective. Joseph Campbell is looking at it as well in an external manifestational sense. There's a reason why he's got 17. Do you know why he's got 17? Because there are 16 court cards, and those 16 court cards make their own circle. And those 16 court cards, when they do the full circle, right, like octave, 7 becomes 8, 16, when they manifest, becomes 17. And so those are like very subtle aspects of how these four bodies interact with each other. So how the four bodies interact with each other is the 16 keys, which in a circle becomes 17 in order to reflect dynamism. There always has to be dynamism. Stagnancy doesn't reflect fundamental existence, because existence is like this nonsense that we've been taught, that you've got to calculate matter in a vacuum. There's no such thing. Matter's happening, it's moving, it's consistent, it's always starting where it begins, ending where it begins. It's you can't just stop it and pull it out of existence and say, let's pretend that there's no octave and it's no shape, it's just in a vacuum. It's not how it works. That's why our physics is so upside down. But the idea of the 16 becoming the 17 and the idea of the 12 becoming the 13 is quite a powerful reflection of the Maslow, or the fundamental macrocosmic spheres as they are manifesting. So it's really interesting how you guys are both looking at different aspects of the same tapestry. It's beautiful, man.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Actually, I've been trying to remember the number 17 a lot recently, because the 17th episode of the whatonearthishappening.com show is the one where Neo comes on as a guest, who is a whistleblower on the Saturnian cult. And I've always been trying to share that video to people for a decade. And now that this whole thing's out in the air now, I need to show it to people even more. So everything 17 has been just popping up to me. I didn't even know that was going to be one of them. But yeah, thanks for mentioning about the court cards. That's awesome. And so there's like 16 gates to 17, and there's 12 gates to 13 too. So that's pretty awesome.
And 17 is chlorine. And chlorine is a purifier. And you know what chlorine makes when it's in a quartz? It affects the quartz to become octahedron. Isn't that interesting? So when it crystallizes, it crystallizes as a octahedron kind of an element, which is really fascinating when you really start to like look at it, like what that represents on a really fundamental level. And so chlorine, yeah.
8 doubled like octo is doubled to 16, so that kind of connects to.
Yeah, in its innate state, it's a cube.
Oh yeah.
But when it's crystallizing in rock crystal, that's why you have what's it called? The octahedron crystals, man.
So is a cube like a hexahedron?
Yes,
Yeah.
a cube. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say chlorine's a purifier, because they use it to like for swimming pools, and it definitely doesn't make us pure. It's very bad for us, chlorine. I guess like the word purify, like what's it really mean? Because chlorine like gets rid of stuff, but does getting rid of something make it pure? Because like they used to use copper in swimming pools to purify the water, which is optimal, but now they use chlorine, and it actually makes you really sick. It messes up your thyroid, and it's kind of like bleach, isn't it? Like, so it's interesting. I'm gonna have to shoot off in a second because it's quite late here, but it's been great talking with you guys.
Big love, dear brother.
Absolutely.
Big love.
And bleach is
man.
actually
I want to point out something.
go ahead.
Sodium chloride.
Salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need it
Sodium.
for your body because the salt drives osmosis through your cells. So what moves the water around your body through the cells is chlorine, essentially. It's interesting to think about that. Sodium is what gives it the movement, but the chlorine also gives it the bond to pull. So like it in the body, it's not supposed to be in on its own. I think chlorine is supposed to work with an activating agent. On its own, it becomes stagnant. Does that make sense? And it becomes poison. But when it's in dynamism, like when it's bonding with the sodium, then it gets the impetus to create the movement of water. So that salt is like what we consider the symbolism of earth purity in alchemy, for example. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. If you actually think about
Right,
materialism, and you really,
Bye,
oh,
guys.
see you later, man.
See ya.
Been great
Okay.
having you, dude.
Much love.
Big love, brother.
Materialism.
Honor having you on. Take care and enjoy your
Yeah.
night, man.
Bye, guys.
Is that with materialism, it's almost like if you go into it deeper and deeper, you kind of circle back into like idealism again. Let me explain that. So I've been thinking about like this idea that if that matter between different dimensions has different consciousness levels, like different like organisms, some are more conscious than others. And I realized the level of consciousness of matter determines the laws of physics of that particular universe. So I've been thinking like with atoms, like at a certain point they become unstable. Around the atomic weight of around like number of 80, that atoms start to become more stable. And I think of it like a juggler. So like if you're somebody and you're trying to juggle balls and you're an amateur and you've never done it before, you might be able to do like 1 or 2 balls at once. But if you get more than 3, you're just going to drop them all over the place. And I realized that, but if you're a professional juggler, you might be able to juggle 5 or maybe even a dozen objects at once. And it takes a certain level of intelligence and consciousness to be able to juggle all those objects at once. And I think that's kind of how I think of atoms. So in a different universe where it's more conscious, an element like uranium, for example, would be more stable because at that point, you would be able to generate more elements at a higher level and thus come up with like different like fuel sources and stuff like that. Because there's also, you have to think about the speed of light. That creates a kind of a capping point for how far the material consciousness goes, because if it becomes completely unlimited, material reality will essentially twist and rip apart and in horrible, unspeakable ways. So what I've really come to realize, it made me think though, is that there are certain universes where matter is more conscious and there's certain universes where it's less conscious, but it gets to a certain threshold where it's so conscious that the matter seems to kind of drop altogether, and then you just get into fluid Zarfax, sort of consciousness. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but what I've realized that by thinking about this is that you start to think about materialism, but then you kind of think of like a meta materialism where it's like you have different material type universes where you have different atomic elements, a different speed of light. And that's another thing. Different universes would have a different speed, different light speed constant, thus allowing for different types of physical interactions and allowing for different types of physical matter to actually manifest itself. And you think about particles as almost being like organisms, and the more conscious a universe, the more complex atoms and molecules and particles it can generate. And then you start to think, by looking at it from that perspective and like high matter and low matter, you don't really think of the universe as like this solid thing anymore. And when you look at it from different frequencies, it's almost like idealism again, where everything is just a dream. And it just kind of melts sort of back into that dream world like state. I don't know, but I think if we want to like create different, like really mess with the laws of physics in the universe, we would have to find a way to alter the speed of light. And if we could alter the speed of light, that would allow for different atoms and molecules to be produced. And Basically, but I don't know. I don't know if I would want to mess with that though, because maybe it would just cause the entire universe to collapse or something like that, and we just get sucked into a black hole by messing with those kinds of things. You know how we screw things up with technology as humans, but it's just something I've been thinking about. And just like I just love extra dimensional stuff like that.
I like what you're saying, Cosmic, and I think you're like onto something there. I think that's quite right about the different grades of matter. Let's call it that, different grades of matter. And in different spheres of being, different grades of matter based upon different. And I think the speed of light is very relevant. I take it to one more level. I don't know how they managed to brainwash everybody into believing that there is a constant speed of light. I don't know how they did it. I honestly don't, because my common sense says to me that light is doing this. Well, it's not really doing that. It's actually an oscillating toric field. Right, so it's doing that. So it's doing that, but we draw that as a two-dimensional wave.
You know, I get what you're saying, Franklin, but I think that it probably still like it must. I doubt that it's like exactly 186,000 miles per second. That I'm sure it probably fluctuates to a certain extent, but I also think that it makes sense that it stays at a certain like range level, right? Like a certain like bandwidth of frequency that stays within a certain speed parameter, because that's what allows reality to have its sense of consistency, for shapes to seem to have a level of permanence. Because I feel like if the speed of light was something that was more infinite and, you know, whatever, then that would basically, then I feel like the universe and all the molecules would just rip apart, because there's no stabilizing factor there. But this is something that's interesting, though. We think that, you know, that because I had the same problem as you, Franklin. I didn't like this idea either of one that light is a constant speed. I was like, no, light is infinite speed. You can't quantify that. But I realized.
Well, hold on. I can actually substantiate that.
Okay.
I can actually substantiate that. Light does not travel at the same speed through water as what it does through air. It does not.
The point that I'm making here, though, is that
no. Let me make a point. Right. Their idea of space, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's different kinds of vacuum out there. There's different space. Are you aware of that? The space around our Earth is one space. The space in our solar system is one space. When we leave our solar system, it's a different kind of space. It's a different kind of toric forces and field. When you go outside into the galaxy, further away, the space is different. This is according to their model, right?
Right.
So the light is traveling through different mediums. That's a fact. Whether the light's in our solar system, whether the light's outside our solar system, it's not the same medium. We can't pretend that it is. When the light's getting closer to the Earth, the medium's different. When the light's traveling through the air, the medium's different. When the light's traveling through water, the medium's different. The amount of particles in the air is going to affect the energy potential of the light. And so every field is affected by its medium. We're supposed to just believe dumbly what they've told us, and there's a reason why they've told us that the speed of light is fixed, but the speed of light is most definitely not fixed. And now quantum physicists, I can probably pull up some evidence, quantum physicists have said light is affected by gravity. Is it gravity or magnetism? Magnetism. I know it's affected by magnetism. So light travels through space, which is affected by gravity, right? So basically, the space is warping and time is moving through the space. So gravity affects the speed of light. Magnetism affects light's movement. Dark matter affects light. This is how they discovered dark matter, right? Because of the changes of the quality, and it's got to do with the way light's moving. Mm-hmm. So I think that they've sold us a lie, because if they can tell us that light is a constant speed, we're one step closer to a materialist philosophy.
Right. But sometimes
if we start imagining that light travels at different speeds in different places, right? If we can imagine light is going to behave differently in different places, then it means we're living in a relativistic universe.
Man, I had a thought and I just forgot it. But, I think that with the speed of light, Oh, okay, I remember it now. I was thinking, what if the speed of light is the IQ of the physical universe? That was something I've been thinking about lately. Like the rate, in a lot of ways, there's a consistency to the speed of light. It's not perfectly constant. I think it probably fluctuates and gesticulates depending upon the circumstance, like an organism would. But there's a sort of can't deny that there's a kind of an equilibrium aspect to it. It tries to maintain a certain level, a certain consistency. It doesn't try to deviate too far, from its norms. But I think that because to me, there's like a relationship between light and matter, a sort of like a masculine feminine relationship. And you think about maybe perhaps the faster the speed of light, the more it interacts with matter and the more it causes different changes and fluctuations and so forth. Because from what the Fae have been teaching me about physical, our Zarfex, is that there's basically kind of, they kind of allocate to like 16 different like physical like universe continuums called Feezerfaxes, right? And each one of these like has I guess the reason I'm fixated on the speed of light is because it seems to reaffirm ideas I have in Zarfexology. Maybe that's my bias on my part, but it seems to kind of reify this idea of the Feezerfax and that the speed of light is like the cap or the membrane of that sphere. So then there'll be different spheres that have different speeds of light and different matter frequencies, and this would work well with my theories. So, if anything, I just like this theory because it seems to complement. It complements my theories essentially. So I take that with a useful thing. But I think you do make an excellent point though on light not being this totally fixed, constant thing, and I think that is an important thing to consider. But I feel like there is a useful utility in looking at the light speed as having some sort of, I guess maybe like a speed limit. Like you think about you're on a speed limit. Like let's say the speed limit is 50 miles per hour. No one is driving exactly 50 miles per hour. There might be some people driving a little under 50. There might be some people driving a little bit over 50. And there's probably a couple of people who are like driving really slow and people driving really fast. But most people try to stay within that speed limit. And I guess that's how I kind of conceptualize the idea of the speed of light. Like there's a sort of like a level that it needs to maintain, but it fluctuates and it shifts. So yeah, I can see the utility in your perspective as well.
So here I'll show you what I'm talking about so that you can understand how they've pulled the wool over our eyes, right? They tell us that light has a constant speed, right? But what they don't tell us, and you research this, if you're a grower and you're growing cannabis and you're studying light, right? This is what you study. You study the frequencies of light. And you notice that the sun is not putting out a consistent frequency of light. So the frequencies of light coming out of the sun are changing. There's different amounts of red, there's different amounts of blue, depending on what's happening in the sun. All light in the universe comes from suns, right? So the frequency of light is constantly changing. The amount of blue light, the amount of red light is changing. Now, there's a difference in speed, as you can see here on the screen that I've got here. Difference in speed between red light and blue light. This is just an example, right? Which isn't taken into account when the sun is putting out more blue light, and when it's putting out more red light, that's going to affect the overall wavelength. So light doesn't travel at one speed. There's whole different bandwidths of light, and different parts of the light are traveling at different speeds. Does that make sense? So that's the first way that we've got to understand the facts as opposed to what they've told us. They tell us that there's just one thing of light. There isn't one thing of light. We perceive one thing of light, but that one thing of light that we perceive is a whole different lot of bandwidths of light frequencies, and they're all moving at different speeds. That's the first point. Second point, and I think this is the smoking gun, right? Now, okay, let's just see speed of light. Okay, so hold on, let's go back to this one. Notice when they're calculating the speed of light, what are they doing? Can you see here? In a vacuum. Right. Is there a vacuum anywhere in the universe? No. There's no such thing as a vacuum in the universe. So they're telling us that the speed of light in a vacuum is XYZ, but they're not differentiating which frequency of light they're talking about, right? And then they're talking about the light moving through a vacuum. Is space a vacuum? No. Let's look at what their science has to say. Space is not a true vacuum, but rather a near vacuum containing low-density particles, gas, dust, radiation, and quantum fluctuations. That is going to affect the speed of light. Depending on what substance of space it's traveling through, the speed of light will be different. The speed of light when it comes through the air is very different to the speed of light when it's traveling in our solar system, is very different to the speed of light when it's traveling outside of our solar system, is very different to the speed of light when it's traveling through water. Do you know what light behaves more like? It behaves more like sound. Sound, speed of sound, is determined by the vacuum, by the medium it travels through. So in the same way, light speed is determined by the medium it travels through. But now they have got us talking about the speed of light as if it's traveling in a vacuum, which is not really accurate. So I'm just pointing this out so that we can see the lie for what it is. Everything in our physics is all about in a vacuum, this could happen. In a vacuum, this could happen. Have we actually seen it happen in vacuum? No, we've guessed. We've esteemed our seance of the situation has determined that this is what the light speed is in a vacuum. But what's the actual speed of light? It's actually far more malleable. And you are right that there is a range of fastness and a range of slowness, obviously. The same with sound. There's a range of speed, fast, and a range of slowness. But I think we've just got to bust this myth of a light speed constant. Because there is no constant light speed. They've taken an average in a vacuum.
Because I'm thinking about this, I got to bring out a point here that's relevant to what you're talking about right now. Like thinking about the idea of a constant speed of light. This is, if you really think about this idea itself, this is not a scientific idea. The idea of something being this perfectly fixed, constant thing, that's a religious idea. So what I'm seeing here, Franklin, is this, there is a propaganda, but it's propaganda from the tentacles of Judeo-Christianity seeping into atheism. So you got to think of this atheist materialism as almost like a head that is growing out of the chimera that is Western civilization. It's got the same, it's a different organism, but it's got the same DNA like in it. And so I think that's an important thing to talk about. And that's why I bring this up, because I think that in a lot of ways, it's like this kind of theology has actually infected our science. Even people who are atheist materialist types, they're following Christian theology and they don't even realize it. They're doing it unconsciously. All this stuff about like perfect constants in science and all this stuff, this is the blueprints of religion, dude. It's not even science at all. In a lot of ways, I feel like, not to sound like a crazy person, but I think what the Fae have been teaching me is actually is like closer to what I think science should be. That it incorporates all of the elements, consciousness too, not just matter. And by understanding things as organisms, like, and light and matter as having organically, of course it wouldn't be fixed, because it's an organism, it's flawed, it's conscious, it gets distracted by things, and light and matter are no different than that. So I think that if we're talking about the propaganda of science and materialism, that propaganda has been influenced by an even older propaganda. And those people, the people who are shilling the propaganda, are not even aware of the propaganda that's been put on them from an even further back generation. I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. And this is the point, right? This is the point. It's like, that's why I call it, that's why I say it's a seance, right? Superstition. To say that light is a constant speed is really superstition, because nature doesn't operate like that. And it gets better, right? When you start to like reckon and imagine, like, for example, light has a source, that we're supposed to imagine that light is some infinite thing with an infinite amount of energy, but that's not how light works. Get yourself a torch and light the torch. What's the first thing you notice about the torch? it has a range, right? Light has a range. It can only travel so far. Why? Because it's losing energy to the medium it's traveling through. Space is not a perfect vacuum. According to their science, I don't even know whether I agree with what they think space is. I think space is more a fluid medium, but I think it's more of the ether. But anyway, that's another story. But let's just say we take their seance nonsense and we use their nonsense to test their theories that they've sold to us, right? Then we've got to imagine this. Light is coming from a finite source of energy, the sun. It's not infinite. At some point, it will have burnt out. That light has a certain amount of energy. The further it travels from its source, the slower it's going to get. Sound. When sound travels at a long distance, the wavelengths change. Right? Isn't that interesting? The sound will sound different because the actual speed of the sound is not a constant thing. So how can light be traveling at the same speed when it's leaving the sun as when it's traveling to wherever it travels to? And what is the range of light's travel? Right? And okay, through vacuum of space, it probably diminishes its speed less as it runs out of energy than what it does here. But like if you're a grower, you'll understand how power works and the compression of light photons per square meter and how to calculate it and how much light intensity you need in order to flower your cannabis, for example, or how much light intensity you don't need if you want to veg it. You don't want more than 300 or 400 microns per square meter, right? Gmol. If you're vegging your plant and it's young, when it's vegging and it's getting like really much older, maybe 400. But when you switch into your flowering mode, you want to increase that light pressure to like 700-800 Gmol, even 1,000 or 1,200. If you're running more, if you are running CO2, for example, because the plants can handle more. So you then have to calculate the distance from your light because light is very finite. So the light coming from the sun has got to be the same. But we've been taught to think of light as this magical thing that never runs out of energy. How the hell? Excuse me? It never diminishes? Of course it's diminishing. It's running out of energy. The fact that light is moving or it's propelling itself means that it's expending its energy in order to expand its field. And that expansion is oscillating frequencies. And those oscillating frequencies are all the different bandwidths of light. For example, when light enters the atmosphere, blue light disperses more than red light. So the far red gets down to the canopies better, for example. That's why your grow lights, you want to increase your red, your far red, because it's necessary. Yeah, it makes the cells grow bigger, so your yield will improve, for example. But it's just really interesting how they've managed to convince us about, like you say, it's a religion, man. Science that we believe is so scientific is a total religion, and you have to, in order to be able to apply all these amazing scientific theorems, you have to believe first that everything happens in a vacuum, which it doesn't. It's like if you want to believe anything from a religion, you have to first believe that there's a God that's doing all of this. Once you believe that, then religion makes sense. But if you don't believe the first thing, if you question that and go, well, where's this God? Suddenly the whole religious thing just falls on its face. And science is, like you say, it's absolutely no different.
It's not.
So that's
Franklin, it's not just that it's its own religion. It's basically the same religion. That's what I'm saying, dude.
Yeah,
you start to realize how a lot of these scientific principles have their roots in theological ideas in the Bible. Like this whole idea of like things need to be objectively true. That started with like Christianity, dude. They're the ones who started that stuff. We think it's like, oh, the atheists. No, they're the ones who started that, man. So, it's just interesting, man, because it's like, you don't think about stuff like that. And I think that's the real psyop, is not seeing how things connect and, metastasize like that,
That's why they have to poison our brains, like Gaz was saying in the beginning, right? That's why they poison us with all their rubbish, because if they don't poison our brains, we will think like hold on. I'm supposed to believe what? Like, why am I supposed to believe that? It just doesn't make sense. Like if you use your own common sense, but they don't want us using our common sense. So they take us and put us into schools. And in the schools, they brainwash us, telling us how to think so that we don't think in the way that they don't want us to think. They've taught us exactly how you're supposed to think.
It's like new atheism is the fourth Abrahamic faith, man.
Look, we've been going for 5 hours. I think it's definitely time to think about wrapping up.
I need to get going soon.
It's been a total honor. If you guys have any more things you want to throw on the table before we start saying goodbye,
I think I'm good. Indy, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that the serpent also ties in with the serpent people, and the Green Emperor of China was said to have come from the West, being one of the serpent people when he helped the Chinese that lived in the wilderness gain the gifts of civilization from him and his wife Nuwa, who in their stories was said to have created mankind from clay of the Yellow River. Both of them were portrayed as having a serpent tail, much like Enki was. And I think sometimes Neptune and Poseidon are portrayed as such as well. The serpent people are associated with the gods of the Western pantheons. And it's, I guess, also tied in with the Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl. And the serpent people also tie in with the Nagas, and there's many other figures as well, and different peoples, which could be ancestral races that had created us. Because Enki was one that created us, and Futsi and Nuwa also had created us in their mythical tales. So we're like the children of the serpent people, which might be why we have no coat of fur. But that's just a little something to help you guys keep asking those questions and start looking into it. Maybe somebody in the audience can bring some answers to the table. Maybe some people can come onto the show. Maybe we people right here on the show can find out more about this stuff and bring it to you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Well, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you all for joining us. It's been lovely. Yeah, I think I've been thinking about that, actually, what you said. I've been thinking about that indeed. I just want to make sure that I am 44.50. 44 or 50 hours. That gives 6. Okay, good. We're going to make it. We are going to make it, ladies and gentlemen. So, big love to everybody. It's been an absolute honor being here. I hope you guys enjoyed our little tongue wagging episodes. And we'll be back on Tuesday. Who knows if Indy or Cosmic or anybody's free. It's going to be ridiculous hours because we'll be on like earlier on Tuesday. I don't know what time we'll be on. I can't think of it right now. Probably like late night on your end because that's when Shinobi's free. And also be back on Friday as well. That's 6 a.m. EST time because that's the time that Tall Tree is free. Trying to fit everybody in. This is a hard one. But looking forward. Naraka. Namaste. There you go, Indy. There's your Naraka. I dig that Naraka name. Maybe you should go with the Naraka. It's a cool tag.
I love that name. Yeah, maybe I'll switch it up.
So big love and blessings to all of you. It's been great. Thank you guys for taking the time to sit with us and enjoy. I hope you've enjoyed. Hope you got what you came for.
All right, I gotta go, y'all.
Big love.
See ya, Indy and Franklin. Take care.
Big love.